There's only one place you can hear Jonathan Mosen, and that's right here, the home of the fun guys. This is Mushroom FM.
Looking forward to being here with you over the next 3 hours for another edition of Mosen at Large on Clubhouse, on Mushroom FM, on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube too. At 5 o'clock, that's Eastern Time, Steve Catway is here. We Catway over to Canada for another edition of the early years. He's looking at version comparisons. At 7, Dan Sweeney is in with another edition of One Hit Wonders. We're live in Iowa with Snow White FM and the Snowman at 8. And Gary's at 11.
Mushroom FM.
This is one mushroom that's magic and good for you. With more variety and great personalities, you've found Mushroom FM. www.mushroomfm.com. Welcome to Mosen at Large Live. I'm Jonathan Mosen. Your thoughts today on what Apple unveiled at WWDC, and we'll have highlights of our recap. iOS 15 will try to keep you focused when they want to take your kids away just because you're blind, the Bonnie Bulletin, and so much more.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Hope you're doing well. Hope you've recovered from WWDC if it was all just too exciting for you, and that you are going to look forward to the next 3 hours. If you'd like to be in touch with the show, you can drop me an email, and that email could contain an audio attachment, or if you prefer, you can write it down and send it in to Jonathan, that's JONATHAN, at mushroomfm.com. You can also tweet with the Mushroom FM hashtag. So if you're listening on Clubhouse, for example, that's the best way to do it, because it's not really possible to kind of do the whole live Clubhouse thing on this particular show. So welcome to you. If you want to contribute, do send us a tweet or an email at the previous address. You can also leave us a voicemail message if you like. That number is in the United States at 864-60-MOSEN, 864-606-6736, right after WWDC's keynote, which was a bit busy, wasn't it? We jumped on Clubhouse. We had a great attendance there, and we also have had many, many listeners to the podcast. But I also know that there are people who listen to Mosen at Large this way, live, and they don't listen to it on the podcast feed. So for you, we're going to play highlights to begin with of our WWDC recap, and that will take about an hour. So if you've heard it before, in the second hour of the show, we're back to content that will be new to you. Welcome to our post-WWDC special. Apple's keynote has concluded, and it's been a mammoth event this year, especially when you contemplate what they already announced in terms of spatial audio for Apple Music, high resolution and lossless, all the accessibility features that they announced in conjunction with Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and yet still there was so much to say. We've got in Studio B at Mosen Towers, we've got Heidi Taylor. Welcome, Heidi.
Hello.
On the other side of the world in North America, we've got Judy Dixon in the great state of... You're in the great state of Virginia, aren't you?
I am.
Commonwealth of
Yes.
Virginia. And Michael Fair in Canada. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Can I just go around the panel and ask you for your overall sort of rating of this event in terms of relevance, excitement, new features? How would you rate it, say, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely epic and 1 being it's a yawn? Heidi, shall we start with you?
I want to go with something like 8.
And Judy?
I'm going to go with 7.
Yep. And Mike?
Yeah, I'm with Judy there. I would go with 7. There wasn't much sort of on the accessibility side that made it to the keynote, but there was so much else. Like there's lots that'll have implications for us.
I think I'd give it a 9, you know. I'm really optimistic about this one, particularly given that there was that big slew of information that came out with Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So we know a lot more about accessibility than we usually do, which is good. Then you got all the Apple Music stuff, plus all of this. So let's go and have a look at what they said, and starting off with the revamp of FaceTime. And what is really clear about this is that they are going after the Zoom market.
Yes.
And the Teams market, the conferencing market. Apple clearly sort of missed the boat there. They didn't really have a product that was fit for purpose when the pandemic came. For me, one of the really great excitements about this is that I have been lamenting the poor quality of audio that you now hear on TV and radio with people coming in during the pandemic, and basically networks are putting anything to air and giving scant regard for the audio quality. That seems to hopefully be leaving us behind as Apple focuses on making the audio in FaceTime sound much better, whether you need to have it hone in on your voice and isolate background noise or echo or that sort of thing, or go real hi-fi. Heidi, what are your thoughts on this all this new FaceTime stuff?
It sounds really cool, but yeah, they're definitely going after Zoom. But it looks like they've done a good job with it.
Particularly given that Android and Windows users will be able to make use of this as well. So clearly they want this to be a universal offering. People have been wanting iMessage on Android for a long time. It's never come, but this one, you'll be able to do at least links to FaceTime calls on any platform. Yeah. Judy, your thoughts?
I thought there were a number of things that were pandemic inspired, having to, not only the messaging and FaceTime, but all the sharing, different things, share with me, share that you can have now in Apple TV and so forth. I mean, I think it seemed to be a lot focused on people sharing things with each other and people connecting with each other.
Share Play is a really cool feature, which we'll come back to in a minute. That's really, very cool. So, Mike, your thoughts on the whole, incursion into the conferencing market from Apple with this update?
I think there's some pretty big implications. I love how you'll be able to focus in on your own sound for when that's necessary, and then go the other way and capture everything. So that opens up everything from recording if you're in the middle of an event and you want to capture everything around you or just eliminate more background noise. I love how they made that a choice, and that's going to be great. And yeah, the share play stuff, once this all gets out there, that'll make doing demos and things so much easier. If we can pull in sound and stuff and imagery for sighted people from other apps, that has a lot of implications right there. So I love the choice, and very much looking forward to experimenting with all this.
Spatial audio is coming to FaceTime, so Apple's really doubling down on this. They introduced it with TV last year, and then they announced that spatial audio is coming to Apple Music. In fact, as we put this show together, there's a special Apple Music event showcasing spatial audio and demonstrating what that will do. So this is sort of supposed to give you a more realistic feel, and people will be in the sound spectrum where they are positioned, which is going to be quite interesting to hear how that works. The thing that you mentioned there, Mike, I think the key is whether you're going to be able to record these sessions or not. Obviously, yes. Teams had this, Zoom's has this. FaceTime, you've not really been able to record that easily.
Yep, that's true, and that might be a missing element. I guess we'll find out in the fine print with some of this stuff.
You can clearly identify who's speaking, so I presume that might be available through VoiceOver in a written form. Portrait mode also. Can you talk about, maybe Judy and Heidi might have a particular interest in portrait mode coming to FaceTime and what the significance of that is?
Portrait mode blurs the background and features the face, the person themselves. So, I think sighted people will find it quite appealing. What do you think, Heidi?
Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I don't really see how great it would be for blind people, but maybe it could help people with low vision. It makes the person clearer and the background like fuzzy and faded, so it's easier to focus on the face. So that might be an implication of that. But overall, it just looks cool.
I am coming into Clubhouse right now with the iRig 2 guitar multimedia interface thingy. And the only reason why I bought that was because of limitations that appear to exist in CallKit. And if you think this is a non sequitur, where I'm going with this is that if all of these high-end audio features are coming to FaceTime, and I rejoice and I celebrate, I really do hope that this will mean a revamp of CallKit so that, say, USB microphones and other USB accessories that you connect through the Lightning port on an iPhone will just work with these things. I was also really intrigued to see, and I think this is a reflection of the pressure that Apple is under, that a lot of these features are going to be available through an API. So the audio quality of Teams and Zoom and some of these other conferencing services should also start sounding better on the iPhone.
I was thinking about that with all the developers there. They're really going to have a great week learning about all these APIs.
Yeah. So let's talk specifically about SharePlay. For those who weren't at the keynote or who want to understand this better, this is basically, I guess you'd call it a remote form of AirPlay that happens over the internet, and it's also designed for just shared experience. So, for example, you can get a group of people together, listen to music or watch a TV show. You all have control over skipping and playing and pausing, which I think could be quite fun. Don't like this track? No, put it back. Well,
The devil is really in the details here, I think, depending on who has control when and, what is allowed. Because some of these things are tapping into subscribed services. So do you all have to have the same subscriptions to do this stuff? Or, there's all sorts of details there that I would certainly like some clarity about.
And how would you talk with each other?
what they seemed to be indicating was that you could send the content that you're share playing to the Apple TV, and then I think if you did that, you would be able to keep the FaceTime audio going. Is that right? I think.
Yeah, well, they showed it with like a video FaceTime call, but yeah. So if you AirPlayed it off to the Apple TV, the sound and the picture was on the TV, but the FaceTime call remained on your phone.
Ah, okay.
And it would be perfectly in sync, they say. So, the best example I have of all the stuff being in sync is Sonos. So they do an amazing job of whole home syncing. So Apple's obviously given a lot of thought to making sure that everybody's watching the same thing, because those things are critical to the shared experience, right? You've got to be able to laugh at the same joke at the same time, that kind of thing.
We used to do that in high school.
Yes, but
Watch
that
the
was so
same TV
retro,
show?
Judy. You actually had to be in person with people then.
With the telephone. No, on the phone.
Oh, on the phone. Yeah, but
Yeah.
but you're not going to get
Watching
the
the
spatial audio and the fidelity.
Watching the same TV show on the phone late at
Yeah.
night.
But I guess if like a TV show was like being broadcast to everyone, it's already pretty much in sync.
right.
Whereas if
It
you're trying to
is.
watch like a video on a streaming service, you have to be all like 3, 2, 1, start, and try and
Go.
all get it started at the right time.
This sounds really cool. I can't help thinking it's a shame that it wasn't here a year ago. But still, it's going to be really cool. And you can imagine people having watched described movie nights, for example. I also didn't see, and maybe it's in the fine print, Heidi, how many people can be part of a share play session.
They didn't mention it, and I haven't been able to find anything yet, but I'll look into it a bit more.
But it did become clear that the apps have to expressly support the feature. So
Yeah.
you won't just be able to share play from any old app.
No, so
Yeah.
there's the Apple apps, and then Disney Plus, Hulu, HBO Max, NBA, Twitch, TikTok of all things.
Now, don't you be dissing TikTok.
Sorry, ESPN Plus, Paramount Plus, and Pluto TV. There's no Netflix on there.
No, well, Netflix isn't even part of the app now.
Yeah, there seems to have been a bit of a falling out there, which is significant because, of course, we also learned later that Siri will be able to play content. You'll be able to use your phone to tell Siri to play content on the Apple TV, and one wonders whether Netflix will work with that. Sharing of the screen was a note that I made. So this is a really positive thing because you've had to install TeamViewer before this. And I wonder what the implications might be, whether this is going to be accessible or not. Because if it is, then that would be pretty exciting and also pretty good news for Ira if there's a way for Ira to hook into this.
That's a good idea.
What a great way to start. Anything that gives us better audio on these things. Rejoice.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Praise Tim. Now, messages. Yeah. So there's this new thing called Shared With You. What does it look like visually, Heidi? You go into the app and
Yep.
and there's a tab there.
Yeah, so depending on the app, there's like a field or a tab, or it depends on the app. So say in music, you go to the Listen Now tab, and then one of the sections in the Listen Now tab is called Shared With You, and it shows you all the things that have been shared, and it tells you who shared them to you.
That works in photos, it works in music, so I can send you a cool retro song. You'll
Yep.
see it in the music tab. Yep.
Yep.
Very good. That was mainly what we had in messages. It was a bit of a less drastic revamp than I think a lot of people were predicting. Oh, this is another general comment I wanted to make. I think that Tim has managed to plug the leaks largely. There was a little bit of leak from Mark Gurman, who's got sources deep inside Apple and has the best Apple sources that I know of. But, there are a lot of surprises there this year, and I think Apple will be delighted by that. Notifications. They have a fresh new look. Basically, you can get a notification summary sent to you, which you can schedule to deliver at the time of your choosing. And basically, the most relevant notifications are going to rise to the top. For example, notifications from people sending you a message, say, that you might need to respond to.
I think they said that they didn't put messages in the summaries. I think you get messages as they come in. I think it's more for like app push notifications.
Okay, so I wonder what
Yeah.
determines what the relevant ones that go to the top are. Perhaps how
the
often
last
you...
time you
Hopefully we'll
access
have
the
some
app.
control over that.
Yeah, I mean, well, perhaps it's machine intelligence that knows how often you act upon a notification.
It's-
They were saying on-device intelligence quite a lot in this presentation,
Yes.
so I kind of think that's probably gonna set a lot of this stuff, and then you'd be able to presumably give it your preferences, or it'll detect what you use when and kind of learn about you.
Yes, it's really nice that kind of WhatsApp-like, your status will be displayed in messages. So if I'm about to send a message to somebody who's in Do Not Disturb mode, then I will know that. Focus mode. This is obviously a really good response to the pandemic. It's not unique to Apple. Windows has had a kind of a focus mode for a while. This seems quite well developed, though. And the idea here is that it matches your device to your current mindset or function. So if you, for example, have a busy day job and you're getting messages from Slack or Teams or your work email account, then you may be in kind of work mode, but then you can switch your focus. You can set up multiple foci. Is that the plural of focus, Judy?
I think so.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I never... When I was working
With a
for Freedom
capital F.
Scientific, I never knew whether to say focuses or not. You can set up multiple foci to match different requirements. So presumably I can set up an out-of-hours one, and that will not give me notifications from Teams, from my work account. I think this is a great idea.
I think this is fabulous. How do you suppose you'd switch among them?
Did they show us the UI, Heidi?
They showed some pictures. They didn't show how you get to it. But I think it's to do with like the do not disturb, so it's probably going to be in Control Center or whatever, or something like that. But they showed all the different profiles they had. So they have just general do not disturb, and then they had like a personal personal focus, a work focus, a sleep focus. So you can choose which one's active at what time. And I assume there'll be some form of scheduling like there is already with do not disturb.
I thought they mentioned settings when they were talking, like you'd be able to do a lot of this and set up what's in each profile, things like that in settings.
Yeah, because my understanding is they will have sort of preset focus options, but that you can create your own from scratch. Is that right, Heidi, do you think? Is there like an add new button or something like that?
Again, they don't show you specifically where you add it, but they've shown where they're editing one of them.
Okay.
And so there's like a field of allowed apps, and you can add new ones or remove ones that are already there. And then you choose to allow those ones through on this particular focus.
Okay, and this will become clear really quickly when people get their grubby hands on the developer beta and break their phones. And
So you could have a presentation focus, and so you can turn off all your notifications, but leave on certain things that you really would want to know about.
yes, one of the things that interests me is I have a very small number of people, family members, who are allowed to break through my do not disturb, and their calls go through. And I do that by saying that anybody who calls me who's in my favorites can override the do not disturb. That's a feature that's been in there for quite a while. And I do that in case family urgently needs to contact me. But there are certain times when I just cannot be disturbed at all. Say, if I got a call from my son now just to say good morning, which would actually be quite a mind-blowing experience, then he would interrupt this Clubhouse session. And so there are certain times when I just can't be disturbed by anybody. So it would be great if there's that kind of granularity there.
Yeah. One of the things they showed off, at least in the iMessage section of it, is when someone's muting the notifications or silencing the notifications with their focus setting, if it's really important, there's like an option to override it and say notify anyway. So if it was like really, really bad, you could push through their settings to get it to them.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, well, this is going to be fun demoing this. That sounds really good. Yeah. Next on my list was a feature that I'm not sure whether this will make a difference to us or not, because it sounds like to some degree we may have already had it, and it could be an example of where accessibility benefits everybody. But this is this live text feature where you can take a picture, say, of a whiteboard or photos, and it extracts the text and essentially makes it actionable. It might turn it into a hyperlink where that's appropriate. This sounds like it could be a big accessibility win potentially.
It's sort of like how on the iPad they've got the feature where you can write in handwriting and it knows what you've written and you can turn it into search or copy it as text. Essentially, it's allowing you to extract text from an image and do the same thing. So whether it's handwriting or on a sign or something, you can search for it. Like if you're looking for a photo with something that might have text in the background, you can search, or you can copy the text out of a photo, or on a phone number, you can tap on that and call the number, was an example they used.
I guess the big difference for us is that this makes it interactable. I guess with VoiceOver now giving us text and image descriptions in text, things like that, we can hear it, but we can't really interact with it. But with something like this, it sounds like we'll be able to actually copy that phone number or dial it right from a picture of, like they had a picture of a restaurant with the phone number in the demo. So that I can see having some key accessibility right there, just to be able to copy and send these bits of text where they can do us the most good.
Who is a Spotlight ninja in this group? Because I must confess, I seldom use...
almost never use it.
I almost never use it.
I actually use it
used
quite
to.
a bit, but I only use it to like look for apps because I've hidden so many away. I just search for apps instead of trying to find the icon. But other people would use Siri for that. I don't really use it for anything detailed.
I use braille screen input for that.
Right, yes. So they keep coming back to Spotlight Search faithfully in most WWDCs, and I keep thinking, oh, maybe I'm missing a trick, but I seldom use it either. But this time there are significant changes, and they include quick access to contacts, turning into more of a search engine, really, because you can
Well,
search for
if
sort
it
of...
good. If it becomes more functional, then we might use it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's I guess the idea. It's like a universal, anything on your device you can just get at from Spotlight, and that yeah, I can see myself using that if it really does live up to the hype, I guess. But especially with it being able to tap into, like, to use intelligence to, like, they had one where you searched for photos of, can't remember what the example was, but there was an example like that, and it was looking for the image elements in the photos to figure out what you wanted.
Sometimes it feels like they're just re-announcing the same thing over and over with Spotlight, but I guess they're not. We had a couple of instances, both in terms of talking about home features, and there was no announcement of Home OS, which some people anticipated. So whether Home OS was a typo, or they're just not ready to talk about Home OS yet, who knows? But there were a lot of these features, and they started with the Wallet app, the emphasis on keys for cars, for hotels, all sorts of places for your home.
For your house.
Yeah, really taking advantage of the ultra-wideband chip in the newer iPhones. So again, those who bought the iPhone SE 2020 model, you are out of luck because there's no UWB chip, and this is one of the reasons why I strongly advised against it, because it was clear that the UWB chip was going to be used more and more for features, and you'd buy a new phone and you'd be locked out of it all. Which is really unfortunate for a lot of blind people who making an iPhone purchase is a big decision. It's a big financial commitment. And it really does look like, yeah, unless you really have to have the Touch ID button, it looks like backing the iPhone SE was backing the wrong horse. But these keys will work with hotels as well, which I think is a really cool idea. You know, just tap your phone on your hotel room door and it'll unlock. Identity cards. Now, is this going to be controversial? Does this run sort of counter to Apple's privacy concept, the idea that you can build an ID card, really, for yourself? I don't know whether there was any pictures that showed what the ID card contained, Heidi, in terms of information, but presumably name, date of birth.
The way it works is, say you have your driver's license, which I know is not a good example, and you scan that, and it takes all the information off it and saves it into your ID. And then when, say, you're at, I think they used an airport, so the TSA, you tap your ID card onto the reader and it will share the information that they need. So they've got legal name, date of birth, gender, height, or all sorts of stuff that they might need. So it takes only what they are requesting and sends that to them.
Why does TSA need that information?
I don't know, it's just the example.
And how are
Because-
they getting it now?
Yeah, all right. Oh, well, I want. Yeah, let's watch that one with interest. There'll be some discussion about that, I'm sure. For those cards to be official, they will need to be supported by the state or country that you are in. Oh, okay, we'll move on to weather. Not too much to say, really, about this from an accessibility perspective, except it sounds like there's a bit more information in it, and it looks cool.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know, it's not that great. They were like, it's such a great weather app, and I'm like, I don't even use it because it's dumb.
Why don't you use it? Do you use a weather app of any kind at the moment?
Yeah, I use the Met Service one.
Yes, so that's the New Zealand weather app, and I use that too because it has weather stations everywhere, and it gives you really good local temperature, which is mainly what what's the temperature and is it going to rain? Both of you, Mike and Judy, do you use third-party weather apps at the moment?
I use Weather Gods, so
Yep.
that's
Great app.
Unless they've really added a lot into the native weather app, I can't see myself switching back to it.
I use the weather app on the phone when I travel, but I use Netatmo at home because we have a weather station inside, outside. So if I want to know what the outside temperature is in my own backyard, I can just ask Siri or I can ask Alexa.
Does that work well for you in terms of reliability?
It works great. There's a accompanying app called Comfort that is very completely accessible that you can run, and that's where you get all the skills from and so forth.
We should have a look at this, Heidi. It's one of those things
Very
I've been meaning
cool.
to. Maps is a different experience from, as I understand it, in North America, from the boring old run-of-the-mill app that we have here. I haven't been to North America for a couple of years now, so I'm not sure how big a difference it is. And I noticed that the new map features are coming to more places later in the year, including Australia, across the ditch, but not here. In Maps this year, in iOS 15, they are adding a lot more detail for certain key landmarks, and I can imagine that could be very handy for blind people wanting to understand a location before they go, or even when they're there, if you can get a lot more description of the place and landmarks. And you also, of course, get a reminder when you're at your stop if you're using maps for transit, which is always very welcome.
They added a lot to the transit part of that, I noticed, and I can see a lot of people really liking that. Especially if they have all the bus stops in as landmarks and things that you can sort of get directions right to, that could be hugely helpful. Now, of course, there are all kinds of other apps that do this, so whether it's a case of too little too late or not, I guess we'll see, but it does sound like they've really beefed up. And they did mention also that they were adding a lot more labels to things, which could tie in for us in terms of more recognizable landmarks and details and things that we might be able to access with VoiceOver, presumably.
So a quick poll, which map app out of Google Maps or Apple Maps is each of your primary map sources when you need GPS directions, that kind of thing? Heidi?
I typically use Google Maps, but that's just sort of like a flow-on from when Apple Maps was awful.
So you no longer think Apple Maps is awful, but you're just sort of being a creature of habit now.
Yeah, I think they've made decent improvements, and they're sort of similar now, but creature of habit.
Yeah. And Jude?
Apple Maps, because I can do it so fast. I can just tell Siri, I want to walk to the Apple Store. And suddenly I have all the directions, everything right on my screen. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to input text. I don't have to tell it anything.
Mike, what's your map app choice?
I guess I would typically use Maps because it's just there. It's the default,
The
really.
Apple one, right?
And I would just typically that's what I would ask directions of if I wasn't using something like Blind Square for more local stuff.
I sometimes use them at the same time.
Blind Square and Apple Maps?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Blind Square will tell you what street you're coming to and things like that. And Apple Maps doesn't do that. But then Apple Maps will tell you when to turn, and it'll tap my watch and tell me which way to turn. Like, I don't know.
Now, that is one of the reasons why I have sort of gravitated to Apple Maps over time. I do like the kind of social integration of Google Maps and some of the cool features like that, like restaurant reviews and different things. But I find that I'm using Apple Maps more for directions because of the Apple Watch integration. And just having that tapping on the wrist and you get to know when it means left and when it means right is great. But I actually use maps a lot less than I did since Uber became my primary transport method of choice, because unlike taxi drivers, it's very rarely that you find a directionally challenged Uber driver. Their driver app does seem to be quite good in that regard. A bit of a random comment that they made here that I took a note of, and that is that voice search is coming to Safari. So this, I guess, puts it on a par with Chrome, which has had a voice search button for some time. And presumably that'll be powered by Siri. AirPods, I think I'm the only person on this group who doesn't have them, because when I had them, I couldn't really use them because of my hearing impairment. So gave them to Bonnie. It will, interestingly enough, introduce some sort of elementary hearing aid type functions this time, because they're going to help you focus on the conversation and reduce ambient noise. And it would not surprise me if what we're seeing is a gentle dipping of the toe in the water towards Apple coming out with a full hearing aid.
There have been rumors about that.
What do you think, Mike? Because you're in the hearing impaired community yourself.
Well, yeah, I've got a pair of hearing aids, and I can thankfully use AirPods, at least the Generation 2 AirPods with my hearing aids. I couldn't do that with the Pro because you have to insert the tips right into your ear. It's a tighter seal, so I don't want to do that at the same time as I'm using hearing aids. And the Max, a little hesitant I don't know how that would work with an over-the-ear headset. I've been hesitant to spend anywhere near that kind of money on something because of my hearing difficulties. Would I get bang for my buck or not is a very, very iffy proposition. So this spatial audio and everything that they're adding, I don't know that that's going to apply to my AirPods or not. Certainly the Siri notifications for messages and notifications now, that I could use, but why would I when VoiceOver essentially does that for us anyway? So it's one of those things where I guess the spatial audio, again, I'm not sure that will trickle down to regular AirPods or not. So I don't know what to expect really from this upgrade.
Speaking of trickling down, Apple has a feature called Live Listen, which AirPods use, but also so do made for iPhone hearing aids. And it'll be interesting to see if some of this noise isolation thing that they're talking about with AirPods is going to be introduced to the Live Listen mode for made for iPhone hearing aid wearers, because that could be quite handy if you can give your iPhone or put it in the middle of a table in a restaurant situation, for example, and it's doing active noise cancellation and perhaps focusing on the person who is speaking. It could potentially take the place of some devices like the Roger Pen from Phonak.
I've actually tried using the Live Listen as kind of a backup in case anything, God forbid, happens to my hearing aids. It's workable, but it's last resort workable. Like, it's not something I would choose to use really for any length of time, because what comes through your iPhone mic, but it doesn't really give you a stereo sense. So I wouldn't use it for navigating or anything like that. So there are limitations to the Live Listen thing that anyone contemplating, as I did, using it for hearing aid backup should think about.
Yes, those of us who have been on this hearing aid journey for a long time will feel your pain, because whenever you use any of these devices, like the Roger Pen or anything, you're getting a mono source. It's the exact same thing sent to both ears, and that means that you have no direction. So if I'm in a meeting and I put a Roger Pen or the iPhone in Live Listen mode in the center of a table, it's really important for me to hear first via my hearing aids microphones where somebody is speaking from, because when I activate the Roger Pen exclusively, I don't know where they're speaking from. Everybody's coming through both ears in exactly the same way. And I have told hearing aid manufacturers about this, and it's amazing how difficult it is to get them to understand that. It's very frustrating. The other thing, I don't know if you found this, Mike, but with Live Listen, there is quite a bit of latency.
Yes.
Just enough so that when you
Just enough
speak,
to
you
annoy
really
my
notice
wife
yourself
when-
echoing back.
when we're trying to have a because it causes your own voice to sort of change as you're trying to deal with this lag. And
Yes.
Sarah certainly has noticed that when we've experimented with doing that.
Yeah. Now, this WB chip is coming into its own again with AirPods. It's really great to see that the AirPods are becoming part of the Find My network now. I presume this must be, is it just AirPods Pro? There are so many models now. Yeah. But those AirPods that have the W1 chip, you'll now be able to locate them like an AirTag. And it's even got proximity detection in there. So if you bury your AirPod in a couch, you should be able to find it.
I lost one of mine under the couch one time, but I didn't know that's where it was. And there are actually third-party apps that will make your AirPod ding, but it happened to be under the couch, couldn't hear it, and the apps didn't tell you the proximity part's the best part about this.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that will be a huge help. And again, because I've just got second generation AirPods, I won't be able to get that. But that is a good idea. I've left my AirPod behind and realized, thankfully, in time to recover it. But yeah, it's easy to do. So very happy they've added that, at least for the more modern, more expensive AirPods.
Sometime in the next 365 days, you'll be having a birthday, though, won't you?
This is true. Yep, this is true.
Spatial audio coming to tvOS. So this is good. That makes sense. We would expect that with all the emphasis on spatial audio that Apple is doing at the moment in music, on TV, and everywhere else.
But only for AirPods Pro or AirPods Max.
Yes.
Ah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Which one have you got?
I've got like the first gen ones, the basic ones.
Oh, well, your birthday's just been.
Yeah. Got a while.
So, shall we have a look at iPad OS, which I have to say is playing catch-up, isn't it? Because Apple really got badly pinged last year. And since then, they have introduced this lovely new iPad Pro powered by the M1. And everybody said, yeah, well, this is all very well, but you need the software to match the specs of the hardware. Last year, we got widgets on the iPhone anywhere you want on your home screen, but iPad OS did not, which was extraordinary, really. So they've got parity there, and also some changes to the way multitasking works. I got a bit lost on the description of the actual changes to multitasking. Did anybody get a grip on all of that?
Yeah, they've done a lot. So I don't think I've ever used an iPad with multitasking, but I've seen them used. So what they've done now is when you're in an app, there's now a new button like in the top center of the screen, which you can tap, and that you can choose how you want your window displayed, essentially. So you can choose to move it to the left, the right, make it full screen, or make it one of the floaty ones that I can't remember the name of. What are those called? Like slide over or something.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And then when you choose that, so say you've got notes full screen and you choose you want it on the right, it then slides it so it's hidden and takes you back to your home screen. So you can choose any app to open up on the other side. So instead of having to drag it up from the dock, which I think is what you have to do currently, it lets you go back into the full system and choose what you're pairing together. And
All right.
It's hard to understand how that's easier.
I don't know.
They mentioned a new set of keyboard shortcuts, which made me take a note here that I really wish Command Tab would come back to the iPhone. It used to work, and then they decided that Command Tab on the iPad was a feature, and they took Command Tab away from the iPhone. This worked exactly like Alt Tab does in Windows, and it used to work on iOS a long time ago. Now it doesn't. I really wish we could have that back. Notes on the iPad has received quite a significant revamp, and I think Apple does an epic job with their Notes app. It's actually really useful. It's got a lot of utility, and now it includes mentions, so that's pretty common practice these days with Notes apps that support collaboration. There's an activity view that shows what has changed in a shared note since you last tuned in, and you can also add a tag to a note, and then there is a tag browser so that you can quickly find notes by tags. This is really good if you're working on a project, for example.
I actually use Bear for my notes, and that's one of its main features is that you don't have to use folders and things. You can just put tags to organize your notes with, and it just keeps everything. You can just pull out a sidebar, choose the tag, And it's a really quick way of just having organized notes without having to actually organize the notes into books or folders. So it sounds like that's a big thing they're bringing into the Apple Notes app, which I will have to take for a spin.
Every WWDC, we sort of say, what third-party app has Apple killed today? So they eventually get there. There are system-wide translation options, so this applies to everywhere, but they mentioned it in iPad OS, but it works on iPhone too. You can select text, including a photo, and then you can choose to translate it, and it goes ahead and does that. So that's a nice feature. Oh, and it's on the Mac as well, I see here from my notes.
It's on device. Like you could have these languages operating on your device without any internet connectivity needed. So that I can see that being huge for like business applications, as people travel again all over the world and need that and need it sort of private and secure. You can have that now.
I wish I had this stuff when I was traveling to countries where English wasn't the first language. I'm not really doing that now, but it's very good. You can build apps for submission to the App Store all on an iPad now. And I really hope that this encourages more blind people to get into development. I know that people have had a good play with Swift Playgrounds and that it seems to be a great experience. In fact, there's a blind developer who's doing great things, who's had a lot to do with Swift Playgrounds and the accessibility experience. Apple is doubling down on privacy. They've been emboldened, I think, by the way that their Do Not Track feature has been received with certain apps. I've read some statistics about the take-up of this feature on apps like Facebook, and it's huge. It's like, last I read it was about 80%, I think, who hit that Ask App Not to Track button. And people are pressing that Ask App Not to Track button regularly. So people want this, and it's sending shivers and shudders through the various industries. Now we have a really big one, and this relates to the little beacons that apps like MailChimp and a lot of these mass emailings that you get that look like they're addressed to you, but they're mass mail, and people want to collect this data. They want to know, and people spending money on it want to know how many people have read my ad, how many people have acted on it. Apple is basically taking that away by allowing you to block these beacons. This is a huge play from them. As a consumer, I think it's comforting. As somebody who does have to send out some of these emails in my day job, it really does sometimes help us to know who has read them, who's opened them. So this is going to be an interesting wee fight play out.
Well, yeah, because I kind of wonder whether we'll reach a point where consumers are really going to regret that we'll get to a point where we start dismantling stuff we take for granted now on the internet that's funded by this data collection and data sale. Are we going to reach a point where we kind of think twice about hitting that do not track button?
This is right, and this is where you see some of these apps now getting quite inventive about their pitches. So what you're seeing with some of these apps now is that they will pop up a screen before Apple's screen. And on that first screen, they'll try and sell to you why you should allow the app to track. And they're getting quite inventive and pleading and explaining, this helps us keep it free or whatever. And then you get the Apple screen. So that they're trying to persuade. And I wonder how email list providers will do the same thing. In iOS 15, you can go into an app privacy report for every app that you have. When you run an app and it asks, say, for permission to access stuff on your network or permission to use your mic or your camera, you will then be able to delve into an app privacy report for each of the apps you have, and it will tell you how frequently it is taking advantage of those permissions. Then we went on to talking about Siri in the context of privacy, because there has been a lot of controversy about various voice services listening to you, taking recordings, and they say, well, we're taking them for data analysis purposes, but sometimes they've been requested by authorities, that kind of thing. Siri has now got on-device speech recognition. So obviously that can't be recorded, but what it also means is that when Siri doesn't have to go out to the internet for information, like, for example, on-device functions, turning on your Do Not Disturb, various things like that that pertain to a device function, I presume querying your calendar, because that will be on your device, it's going to be very, very quick, which will be a huge relief, because it is amazing how often Siri stumbles and falls talking to its server and says, on it, and all sorts of other nebulous things.
Very looking forward to that, because I've had many requests that you'd think would just be handled anyway on the device hang because of that reach out. So I'm very happy with this.
This seems to be worse lately.
Apple's finally pushed the pages to their website telling us all about the things. So I have fine print about this in particular. With the Siri on device, you have to have an iPhone with at least an A12 Bionic chip, and you have to download the speech modules, which I guess makes sense. And then they've got all the places that it's actually going to be available listed as well.
And they also said that Siri has a lot of new features this year. I don't know whether there's any more information on the website about iOS 15 and Siri and the new features they were referring to, but that's good because it really has lagged. Then we talked about what happens if you get locked out of your Apple ID, and I've actually had to try and help family members who got into this predicament for various reasons. And now you can give a recovery code to friends or family to help you get back in, which is really good. As the kind of family tech support person, I will happily store those codes in a safe place, and that will make life a lot easier. And also, just like Google, who've done this for a long time now, Apple is introducing legacy contacts, so that when you eventually shuffle off this mortal coil, somebody will be able to get into your Apple stuff and let Apple know that they shouldn't really be taking money from you anymore because you're dead. But I'm hoping that I will be uploaded to the cloud before that happens. That's like, I can just keep running as a routine. So that's my goal. I want to upload myself. Now there's iCloud Plus. This doubles down to more on privacy. So they've got this thing called Private Relay, and that encrypts the traffic that leaves your device, and then it's sent through 2 separate internet relays. So it's very hard to decrypt. It sounds a bit like a kind of a VPN, but VPNs are typically a bit laggy. They affect performance. Apple claims that performance is not going to be compromised with this feature. Now, this hide my email feature is an interesting one because I worry about the abuse potential for this, and I guess the devil will be in the detail, but it lets you share unique private email addresses, and then when people reply to those addresses, they'll come back to your regular email box. So it's kind of like the sign in with Apple option that you already have. You can delete these, well, for want of a better term, burner email addresses at any time. Any thoughts on that from anyone?
But wouldn't it be like the credit card where you can get a burner credit card number now from your bank and use that when you're concerned about a transaction?
I suppose.
And
but what if somebody sends... Yeah, I guess it is traceable in the end, isn't it?
it's a one-time thing.
Well,
I mean, that's what would make it work, is that it only works one time.
yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is if somebody sends an email that's abusive or defamatory or something like that, I guess in the end, if people became involved who needed to investigate that, if you had performed some sort of illegal action with it, then Apple would have to disclose, I presume, wouldn't they? That's the thing that worries me, is just...
If they would disclose anything else about you.
Yeah, what mischief could people make with these burner email addresses?
But they could go get one from Gmail now.
I can see the value in it too. Obviously, sometimes you may want to be kept up to date. Say a conference. This is a really good example, actually. You want to sign up to a conference that you want to attend, but sometimes those conference providers take the liberty of spamming you forevermore once you've attended the conference. And so if you could use one of these email addresses for that, then you could just delete the email address when the conference is over.
I don't know if that's the way it's going to work. I got the impression it wasn't persistent, that it was a one-time, if you could just generate an email address that wasn't yours, you'd use it, and then it would go away.
My notes here says you can delete them at any time. So
so they are persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in your iCloud settings. You can create a new iCloud address, and then when you're done with it, you can delete it.
Yeah.
You can do that now with Gmail.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair comment. Yep. It's got some features for connecting security cameras and
It's
doorbells.
unlimited now.
Unlimited, so that doesn't count against your storage. I don't know if this is a New Zealand thing, but it's hard to find at the moment doorbells that are compatible with HomeKit.
Haven't tried.
Well, we've got the Ring Video doorbell, and I do not like it. I'd be happy to replace it with a HomeKit compatible option if I could just find one. And perhaps Apple's new open standard that they're working on, I didn't catch the name of that open standard, but they're working on it with a bunch of other home appliance manufacturers that could help with this. Changes in the health app. Walking steadiness measures how fast and how evenly you walk. So that will be good. I guess it could provide you with some warning. Interpreting lab results. So that's good when you get your lab results, assuming you can get them in an accessible format and you can tell the health app about them. It'll tell you how your lab results compare. You know, are they in the normal range? Should you be alarmed? What do all these statistics mean? That's a fantastic feature. And you can also, if there is a compatible medical record system, share your data selectively. So the data that you want to share with a medical professional. And you can set up a family circle where your health data can be available to other people. They really I thought they told it quite beautifully in terms of the use case for this. There is a point in your life when you're in the middle and you've got elderly parents who you are supporting and potentially children that you're supporting as well, or perhaps two at different times. So this is a nice feature if it's handled carefully. WatchOS was a bit quiet this year. The enhanced breathing app is great, so that includes reflections now. I know people can be a bit scathing about the Breathe app, but mindfulness is a good practice. You can now track your respiratory rates in the Sleep app and elsewhere. Anybody using the Sleep app, by the way?
I use it.
I guess I use auto sleep on my, for my watch.
What does auto sleep give you?
It gives a bit more in terms of deep sleep versus non-deep. Like it tries to track the stages of your sleep, and if I had a more advanced watch, I guess it would track blood oxygen and to keep track of more factors. Apparently, the sleep app, the regular one, is a bit more basic. So I like hearing that they've added more to it. That's going to do some good. And for a lot of people, you don't really need anything super detailed, unless you have known sleep issues. So I can see that this as being a pretty good addition.
How about the Sleep app, Heidi? That's default. That's what you're using, right? How does that work for you?
It works pretty well. I mainly started using it because Henry's sleep schedule is so screwed up that it screwed up mine, and I wanted to re-regulate mine. So I've been using it to sort of get back on track and monitor how well I'm sleeping and things like that, and it works pretty well for me.
Yeah, because Henry works sometimes during the day and then sometimes he has to switch and work during the night. And
then in the days in between, his sleep schedule rises and falls all over the show, so he doesn't even have a sleep schedule.
Is he using the Sleep app?
No.
They mentioned the Fitness Plus stuff. Is anybody using the Fitness Plus?
I have tried. I have really tried.
Yeah.
It is. There are a few that are accessible enough to use, but a very few. They just have made no effort at describing what they're doing. It's really difficult.
I was really disappointed by it. I got the trial
Yeah.
and then decided not to keep it because of exactly that. Unusual for Apple because I really had high hopes. It's one area where accessibility's let the side down.
I wrote to the accessibility email address about it, and they never answered me.
Really? Oh, I mean, normally you would at least get we'll pass your feedback on, which
I
basically
know.
means they're not going to answer you.
Yeah, that's certainly a widely spread disappointment among the blind. I've seen a lot of commentary on Twitter and other places about that, and I kind of share it. I can use the walk. There's some podcast kind of talks.
Yeah, the audio
with,
walking things are
yeah,
nice.
but that's really the only thing I've been able to really make use of with the fitness app so
Some
far.
of the yoga ones in there are actually pretty usable because they actually do
okay.
describe it enough to do it.
There's another third-party app that's specifically audio-based workouts, and the name is blanking on me.
Aptiv.
Yeah, there's
There's-
a couple of them.
There's several actually.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my next book, so
Oh, well, good.
Well, there we are.
stay tuned.
And of course, I actually bought when they were on sale all of the Blind Alive workouts, and they're really good. I enjoy those. Support for Find items, hooray! It's come to the Apple Watch. It was very strange when I got my AirTags and I realized that the Find app on the watch is just called Find People.
Yes.
And so you couldn't
Yeah.
find your stuff on the Apple Watch, but you will be able to in WatchOS 8.
Yeah.
That's good. Are you using AirTags, Judy?
Yes, I have them and I have deployed them, but I haven't had to actually use them because I haven't lost anything.
What's the verdict? I guess you've played with the proximity thing.
I think the proximity thing is very cool, and I mean the implementation is great. I wish the sound was louder.
Yeah.
And I mean I don't have a hearing impairment, and I have trouble hearing them, and I wish the sound would continue. It's only a couple of little things, and that's it. It stops. It would be better if it was like when you ping your iPhone with your watch, it just pings one time. But if you actually tell Siri to find your iPhone, it'll keep pinging. I don't understand why they did that.
Yes, it's really not good. It goes for a very short time, and it's not particularly loud,
Yeah.
but the proximity makes up for it. So
It does. It's great.
there was some comment on tvOS, some fairly minor changes there. Shared with You has a row in tvOS, and there's also a For All of You row, which I guess tries to collate all the interests of family members. I presume it works based on family sharing.
Yeah, something like that. But like the way they showed it is it's like there's the For All of You row, and then there's like an edit button in the row, and you can select the profiles of the people who are actually watching at the time. Which is pretty cool. So you can change it based on like if it's just you and Bonnie, or you and Bonnie and me and Richard and David and Nicola, for example. The show.
Goodness knows what the heck it would come up with then.
Yeah.
Excellent. HomePod Mini can be selected as the speakers for your Apple TV 4K.
Now, I don't understand this. You can do it now. I have two HomePods. I guess because it's the minis. Because right now I have two HomePods for my speakers for my Apple TV 4K.
Yeah, so HomePods could already do it, and now they're letting the
now it's
HomePods
the
Minis
minis.
do it as
Okay.
well.
And you can do it in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Look, they've missed the boat. I mean, in New Zealand, we're very much a soup drinker country because they arrived here first, and everybody's got it. And in fact, the Ministry of Social Development spent a large amount of money. No, I'm telling you, they spent a large amount of money to give any blind person who wants one an Amazon Echo for free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so why haven't you got your one yet?
Because I feel tremendously uncomfortable about somebody on my income taking a free Amazon Echo from the government. I don't think that's appropriate.
It sounds to me like they're kind of trying to, maybe they'll do more development with the HomePod minis and kind of bring more sort of rich features to deal with governing the home, sort of making it a sort of a home hub thing, kind of like the Echoes already are.
They are amazing. They sound so tremendous. You can't imagine. And two of them are so much better than one. I mean,
The
more than
HomePods?
twice as good. Yeah, the minis.
How would you compare them with the Sonos range?
They're different. I mean, Sonos doesn't have any tiny little things like that. I mean, this is a tennis ball. I mean, it's the smallest little thing, and it sounds so good.
Yeah. Have you seen the Sonos Roam?
I do. I have a Sonos Roam, and I've listened to your podcast, and I still can't figure out how to use it.
Oh, no.
I keep thinking I'm going to sit down with this thing and figure it out.
Now, Siri comes to third-party devices. Now, that actually had me yelling, exclaiming in surprise.
Scaring the guide dog.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Obviously, Apple is feeling the pressure with Google Home, and particularly the Amazon Echo engine, who I won't name because it triggers it. But they are clearly having to respond to that. So Siri coming to third-party devices is a massive play on Apple's part. There is, what else have we got here? The package detection. So Judy's happy about that.
I like that.
Yeah.
But of course, that'll only work if you have like the wide field of view camera that can actually see like the step in front of it.
And if you had a
Whereas-
camera.
Well, that too, yeah. Whereas some cameras just sort of look at the bit where a person, like the
I mean,
top
do I
half
just
of a
shine my
person
phone
is.
out the front door and have it look for a package?
I did notice that my Ring video doorbell has now started to get a bit smarter, and when a person comes to the door, rather than just saying there is motion at your front door, it says there is a person at your front door. So everybody's getting there. Let's talk about macOS Monterey. Universal Control lets you use a single mouse and keyboard to move between the Mac and the iPad. Now, many people are doing this with Bluetooth keyboards already, such as those from Logitech, where you can have 3 devices paired with the one keyboard and switch between them. But of course, the difference is you could use any keyboard because it's all being handled in the operating system level, and you can switch between your devices in software. AirPlay to Mac. Now, this is nice. So you can use your Mac as an AirPlay receiver. Rogue Amoeba had an app that handled this. I think it was called Airfoil Speakers or something like that. But now AirPlay is built in so that the Mac can be a receiver. This makes a lot of sense because the speakers in some of these Macs are just tremendous. So if you can send stuff via AirPlay to them, that makes a lot of sense. And shortcuts coming to the Mac. Now, you have to read the code here. What they are saying is that the automate features of Mac are going away. They talked about how this is the start of a multi-year transition. So what they're signaling is start using shortcuts instead of automation because it's going away at some point. So there was also going to be some Mac-specific shortcut-related features as well. I hope that shortcuts are improved in iOS 15 because something's happened in the last, I think it was with iOS 14, where they don't execute the way they used to, particularly if you tap them. It's a similar experience with Siri, but if you tap them, you seem to get additional weird confirmation dialogues that affect the workflow of them. Anybody else seen this?
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I don't do much with shortcuts, really.
I have all sorts of shortcuts, but they've become a lot less useful.
So do I.
Yeah. So
And they
I'm
stop
hoping
and
for
ask
good
you
things.
questions. Yes.
Yeah. All right, and then tab groups. So tab groups are coming to Safari for the Mac, and they let you save groups of tabs and load them later. And web extensions are coming to Safari for iPhone and iPad as well. So that's a really brief... No, it's not a really brief. It feels like it is. It's like an overview of what's going on in Apple land. Any final comments?
I just want to say that the redesigned Safari looks really good, and the one thing I miss most about my Mac and not having it anymore is Safari.
Why is that?
I don't know, it was just always such an amazing web browsing experience for me, and everything else just isn't as good. And like, you used to be able to get Safari for Windows, but they stopped that years ago, and it made me really sad.
Oh dear. Yeah, well, yeah, I must admit it's looking like a pretty cool package. So, any closing thoughts on the whole WWDC keynote?
I would have kind of liked to see a bit more about accessibility, sort of make it into the keynote. I always feel like developers really pay attention to those, and it's always a good idea to showcase some of what's coming in accessibility with that. But I'll be keeping a very close ear on the rest of what is offered in the pavilions and the videos, what I can access as a non-developer for the rest of WWDC to see what other details are going to come out that didn't make the keynote, because I get the feeling there's going to be a lot this year.
So
Just
you don't
given-
think that the approach that they took, where they made a massive number of accessibility announcements on Global Accessibility Awareness Day about iOS 15 and WatchOS 8, all that detail, you don't think that was the right approach?
I'm not sure. I like how they did that. I just wonder how if developers kind of made special efforts to catch that, or whether it might have been better to spring it on them during the conference. It'll be interesting to see. I certainly appreciated the earlier heads up, and I know the conscientious developers that keep an eye out on this sort of thing. I'm sure they did too. But I always kind of wonder about the people who maybe aren't paying as much attention and just are busy developing their apps without the awareness, right, of what they could do to make it better for us, and how to capture more of their attention.
Judy, any final thoughts?
They didn't mention LiDAR at all.
No. What would you have liked to have
that's
seen
right.
with LiDAR?
They're going to increase it from 16 feet to 30 feet. That would be nice.
Is
I
that
think-
possible?
I think that's a
who
hardware
knows?
limitation.
It probably is, but then that's the next phone's going to have hardware that's going to increase it from 16 feet
Well,
to 30
then that
feet.
would come in the iPhone event, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, maybe.
Yep.
But they'd have to tell these guys.
Yeah.
I
get
just think I just think it's very cool, and it's only going to get cooler. But I just want it to get cooler faster.
I get the feeling that the reason why we didn't hear much about WatchOS 8 is that a lot is going to be dependent on what comes next in the hardware. There are still pretty persistent rumors about the glucometer, and if
Oh,
that
wouldn't that be
comes, that will be a
fantastic?
big deal for you. You will see a massive take up in the blind
Huge.
community on the Apple Watch.
Mushroom FM.
Thanks to our panelists for going through the WWDC keynote, and we'll have some more listener feedback on that keynote in just a moment, including some of the things that the panel have said. We're also going to be focusing on iOS 15's focus mode. This is a new feature I really like, and we're dealing with a really, really troublesome topic. What happens when you're a new parent and social services want to take your baby away?
Mushroom FM.
Mushroom FM.
Jonathan Mosen. Mosen at Large Podcast.
It is terrific to have you listening, no matter where you are listening from, on Clubhouse, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and of course Mushroom FM. If you would like to be in touch with the show, let me just give you that contact info again. Jonathan at mushroomfm.com is my email address. That's JONATHAN at mushroomfm.com. Now that email address you can use to send an audio clip so we can let your voice be heard. Always good to have a variety of voices. Or you can just write the email down. You can also call the listener line, and that number is a US number, and it's 864-60-MOSEN, 864-606-6736. If you are following along on Twitter, on YouTube or Facebook, then you can leave a message in the chat box in those respective apps, and you can also tweet with the Mushroom FM hashtag. Just write the number sign and Mushroom FM anywhere in your tweet, and you can then track that hashtag. Although the conversation's pretty quiet today. Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference has now concluded, and there's quite a bit more to say since we produced the recap right after the keynote. Apple has announced the winners of its design awards for 2021. These are prestigious, they are highly sought after by developers, because if you win one of these awards, you get a lot of attention. So let's go through 3 that I picked out that I think are worthy of note. Warm congratulations to Voice Dream Reader. This is one of those essential apps for blind iPhone users. Winston Chen, its developer, has done such a good job with this app, developing it consistently over time, with many of the new features implemented as a result of user feedback. Voice Dream Reader is incredibly powerful, and I love using it to compile a daily newspaper of articles from my RSS feeds, which I listen to by adding them to Instapaper and then reading them in Voice Dream. Carrot Weather is also a category winner, this time in the interaction category. Carrot Weather is one of the best weather apps there is. It's available for your iPhone, Mac, Apple Watch, and even Apple TV. It presents detailed weather information from multiple sources with a good dollop of snark thrown in, and accessibility is very good. Great app. And finally, Be My Eyes is a winner in the social impact category, and this is epic news. I remember seeing Hans, the blind guy who came up with the idea of Be My Eyes, consulting with a bunch of blind people on an iPhone-related email list about his idea. He got a lot of negative feedback about it. Basically, people said, don't bother. Yet his app has made a huge difference to many blind people. It just goes to show, when you believe in something enough, you have to trust your instincts, go with your gut, follow your dream, and get it done. Well done to Hans and the Be My Eyes team, and keep up the great work. Depending on your perspective, the bold, the brave, or the stupid have installed iOS 15 Developer Beta 1, which was released right after the keynote. In fact, even before we concluded our keynote recap, we had blind people getting in touch saying that they had installed it. Not massive changes for VoiceOver this year, and as many people have said, I'm relaxed about that as long as bugs are fixed. Sadly, some of the irritants that I have been hoping to see fixed have not been yet, but we are at the beginning of the cycle. In particular, it is still echoing the word space even when your keyboard echo is not set to character. Every time you flick right in Braille screen input to enter a space, that one really does slow you down hearing the word space every time you enter a new word. There are no changes at this stage in the way that the Mantis is performing, with a very limited number of keyboard commands available, and I understand that Braille is no better on Perkins-style keyboards as well. All will become clearer over time, of course, but I'd like to show you one particular feature today that isn't necessarily accessibility related, but it has come up on this podcast as being on people's wish list. And this one looks fairly feature complete. And my thanks and congratulations to Apple for doing this. This relates to the focus system that they talked about in the WWDC keynote. I've been using iOS 15 for only a few days, and already it has improved the way that I work and the way that I deal with notifications. So let's take a look at how this works. I'm going to ask Siri to open settings, and this gives me an opportunity to mention that when you have Siri on your device, it's really fast for on-device related tasks. That said, in New Zealand, we are not supposed to have this feature. If you set your language to English New Zealand as your input language for Siri, in other words, the kind of voice that Siri wants to recognize, you will be out of luck. So, for my New Zealand friends, you have a number of choices. You can switch your language to English Australia, English US, or English UK, and see how Siri gets on recognizing you. I guess I'm fairly lucky that my voice is relatively neutral. It doesn't have a hugely strong New Zealand accent, and I found just switching it to English US really doesn't seem to have impeded the recognition of what I'm saying at all. So dig how fast this works. Open settings.
Settings.
Dude, fast, isn't it? And I haven't gotten used to it yet. I'm sure I will get used to it, but every time this happens, I think, wow, this is such a big improvement. Then you can flick through your settings, or you can just tap on the screen if you know where it is to find
Focus button.
And this is the interface to set up the focus system. If you weren't following along with the WWDC keynote and its related coverage, you may not be clear about what the focus system does, but as we explore this, it will become clear, so I'll double tap.
Do not disturb button.
I'm in Do Not Disturb at the moment, which is just one of several focus options that you can set up because I'm recording and I don't want to be disturbed by notifications. With previous versions of iOS, you could either be in Do Not Disturb mode or not. You could go into notifications and decide which notifications were sent to you, but it was all a bit convoluted. I had my Do Not Disturb set up so that calls from my favorites would go through to me even when I was in Do Not Disturb. And in my phone favorites, I would have family members and people that really did need to get hold of me. The trouble with that is that there are times when you genuinely just can't be disturbed at all. For example, I might be in a meeting, and one of my kids might just be calling me to ask something that isn't urgent, but they don't know that, and so they call and the phone goes off. It's not a big deal, obviously. I would put my phone into silent mode whenever I was in such a meeting, but at times, you just don't want to be bothered at all. And of course, if you did get a call from somebody when you were reading something from your Braille display, say notes for a presentation or something like that, then the focus would be taken away and it would all be a bit of a drama, even if your phone was set to silent. So now, when I put my phone in Do Not Disturb, it genuinely means I can't be disturbed by anyone. This is my highest level of unavailability without turning the phone completely off. It means that I have all my phone functions, but no notifications and no calls are going to get through to me now in Do Not Disturb. If I flick right, we'll have a look at other focus options.
Sleep button.
When I'm asleep, if my kids are calling me in the middle of the night or other family members, then something seriously is wrong. So I do want to be disturbed by them when I am in sleep mode. And so I've configured my sleep options this way. Let's have a look at what's here. I'll double tap.
Allowed notifications heading.
The first thing you need to decide is what notifications are allowed through when you're in this mode. I'll flick to the right.
People button.
If you double tap this option, you'll be in your contacts list and you will be able to determine which people are allowed, if any, to break through your focus and get through to you. And this appears to apply to calls and text messages. If you have contact groups set up, you can also specify a contact group. I'll flick right.
Apps button.
Similarly, which apps are allowed to break through your particular focus that you're setting up here? If I double tap,
People button 1 of 2. Selected apps button 2 of 2.
you're taken to the same screen actually, whether you choose people or apps, and there are two views, and the apps view is now selected. So when I flick right,
Apps in the allowed list can send you notifications during sleep. Allowed apps. Remove all 0 button. Add app button.
I'll double tap the Add App button
Apps heading.
and flick right.
Done button. Search field. Hash symbol button. Cap A button. Cap B button.
And we've got this index of apps here. If I navigate by heading,
Hash symbol heading.
we're in the number sign heading, and I'll flick right.
1 news.
That's a news app from New Zealand. If I were to double tap this, then it would be allowed to send me notifications through this focus. But I don't want any apps sending me notifications when I'm asleep. To get out of here, we tap the,
Done button.
which I'll do now.
Sleep back button.
I will indeed activate the back button with a 2-finger scrub. And the next thing that you can determine is whether you have time-sensitive notifications coming through in this focus.
Time sensitive notifications. Switched button off.
I don't believe that you as the user can define what a time-sensitive notification is, but developers, I think, will be able to. You do have some control, though. When a time-sensitive notification comes through from an app for the first time, you're asked if you want to keep receiving them as time-sensitive notifications. For example, I use the calendar extensively, and I also use the Reminders app extensively. The first time I received notifications from those apps in iOS 15, I was asked if I want to keep receiving them as time-sensitive notifications, and I said yes. And now that means that if I turn this feature on in one of my focus modes, then I will receive those notifications, even when that focus mode is on. So if you want to sit down and do some serious writing, or perhaps you're reading a book, and you don't want to be bothered by breaking news notifications and Clubhouse and social media of all kinds, but you do want time-sensitive notifications, turn this on. You'll be bothered far less, but you won't be completely excluded from things that might require your immediate attention. Now, when you're in sleep mode, you want to sleep, so that's why by default the time-sensitive notifications are off. And indeed the operating system provides a wee explanation of this feature.
Allow people and apps to notify you immediately, even when you have focus turned on.
I'll flick right.
Share focus status. Switched button on.
What does this do? Well, let's ask the operating system by flicking right again.
When this is on, tell apps you have notifications silenced and allow people to notify you anyway if something is important.
Now, you may choose to switch this off when you're sleeping. You just don't want to be bothered, but if you have family members who are dependent on you for some reason, or you really are in a mission-critical kind of role where somebody might need to wake you up for a really good reason, you might want to leave this on.
Customization heading.
And now we're in the customization section.
Home screen button.
Let's have a look at what this does. I'll double tap
Sleep back button.
and flick right.
Home screen heading. Custom pages. Switched button off.
What does this do? Well, it tells us here too.
Choose specific home screen pages to show when the focus is turned on.
This could potentially make you rethink the way that you organize your apps. If you're a neat freak like me and you have many, many hundreds of apps, as I do, you may well have got all your apps organized into lovely folders. Sometimes people look at my home screen and they say, wow, you've got such an orderly iPhone screen. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter so much anymore because of Braille screen input, which I use a lot of the time to launch apps. And of course, now that Siri is so much more reliable for these sorts of functions on device, Siri's a bit more viable than it used to be. And now you can set up individual home screens that might pertain to a particular focus. This is really designed to stop you from being distracted. Let's say, for example, that you set up a page on your home screen that has all of your work-related apps. So right now I have a folder called Productivity, and that's served me well under the old system. But if I want, I could move those productivity apps, which are usually work-related, onto a page called Work. If I set my focus to work, I could do things like get rid of all of the social media notifications that aren't of interest to me, perhaps have 1 or 2 breaking news apps come through that allow me to stay in touch with really important things that are developing, and only have the page for my work-related apps visible. So, like the feature says, it really allows you to focus. The reverse is also true though. In this era of push notifications and always-on devices, it can sometimes be difficult to let go and recharge, and that is so important for all of us. So, you can set up a home focus when none of your work apps are visible. You can stop notifications from Teams or Slack or whatever tool your workplace uses. You can make those work-related apps disappear entirely while you're in your home focus. We'll go back.
Allowed notifications heading.
And the next option on this screen is
Options button.
I'll double tap it
Notifications heading.
and flick right.
Delay delivery switched button on.
What does this do?
Notifications you receive that are not in your allowed list will be delivered directly to Notification Center until the focus is turned off.
So this just makes it a bit less tempting to look at things that you may not want to look at.
Hide notification badges switched button off.
You know how you flick through your home screen and you see, for example, Castro, 89 new items, if you subscribe to a lot of podcasts. If that kind of a badge that shows you that you've got a number of unread messages in Slack or Teams or any of those applications or Facebook posts, if they are going to distract you when you're not receiving notifications from those apps, but you can see the badge on the home screen and know there is stuff in there that might tempt you, then you can turn this feature on so you won't see the badges. Those are the only options available at the moment, so we'll go back.
Time-sensitive notifications switched button off.
We've reached the next heading on this screen.
Schedule and health heading.
And these options seem to be specific to the sleep focus because they relate to things like bedtime and your wake-up alarm. But if you're configuring a focus that is not sleep-related, there are options pertaining to when this focus triggers, and it could be at a particular time of day, it may be based on your location, or a number of other criteria. It's very flexible. I'm going to go back to the previous screen, which will take us back to our list of focuses.
Sleep button.
I tried to avoid saying focuses because I think the plural is actually foci, but it sounds ridiculous saying that. I'll flick right.
Personal setup button.
We have the personal option, which I have not set up at this point.
Work setup button.
And similarly, the work option.
Focus silences alerts and notifications. Share across devices on.
This is really cool. If you have another device in Apple land, you will be able to share these focuses on your other devices.
When a focus is on, it will be turned on across all devices. Focus status button.
If you double tap this button, you will see all of the apps that can access your focus status. And when I go in there at the moment, at this early stage of the cycle, Messages is the only app that can see my focus status. So if somebody else is using iOS 15 and they message me when I'm in my sleep mode, it will let them know. If we flick right,
Phone calls button.
and this is the same user interface that was present in the old Do Not Disturb options. You can choose to let all phone calls through. You can have phone calls only from favorites or no phone calls at all. And I have chosen the no phone calls at all option because I can let specific contacts call me through the other settings that we've looked at. And you can create your own focus settings from scratch. So if you want to create one, for example, that relates to reading books, and you want to be very clear about the only people who can bother you, the only apps that can interrupt you, you can do this now. This is a feature that I think many of us can really use. It adds a lot of value to the device, and well done to Apple for its implementation. So that is a look at iOS 15's focus options. And now, of course, we can do this really quickly. Turn off Do Not Disturb.
Okay, Do Not Disturb is now off.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
James Muirhead is writing in and says, "Good morning, Jonathan, this time from a much sunnier and warmer London. Having listened to a couple of your podcasts, I note that you are quite excited about the prospect of a glucose monitor appearing in the new version of Apple Watch. While this may be of some value, it is important to know that blood glucose, though important, is completely outranked by blood insulin. Strong evidence is appearing which links high insulin, hypoglycemia, and insulin resistance to many chronic metabolic diseases. It is quite likely that a, quote, normal glucose level, unquote, is being maintained by a madly over-revving pancreas, which is striving to keep glucose acceptably low. For example, if a routine visit to your doctor shows that your blood pressure is high, then it is likely that you will be prescribed pills from one of 4 groups: ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, or diuretics. Your doctor has no idea which of those will work, and if, on follow-up, your BP is still high, then she will probably add in pills from another group. She may have tested your hemoglobin, A1C or glucose, and they are within normal limits. However, there are 5 possible reasons why high insulin can be the root cause of the raised blood pressure. Your doctor will have no idea of your insulin level, as insulin measuring is not part of the standard blood panel examination. I know that you are always keen to learn, Jonathan, and I strongly recommend reading Why We Get Sick by Professor Ben Beckman. That's spelled Bikman. This is a book aimed at the public, and it systematically links raised insulin levels to many of the chronic conditions which beset people eating a Western diet. Western diet means consuming a large amount of processed food. An even harder-hitting book is Metabolical by Professor Robert H. Lustig, spelled Lustig. Again, this is aimed at the public, but should be compulsory for all in the medical profession. He swings some mighty punches at his own profession, at food manufacturers, and the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Richard Knobbe, that's Knobbe, an ophthalmologist from the United States, does a very persuasive 45-minute YouTube video on the iniquities of vegetable/seed oils with particular relevance to age-related macular degeneration. His points are well argued and strongly suggest that the condition is neither age-related nor genetic. Yes, I know that 20% of the above information will be shown to be faulty in 5 to 10 years, but that still leaves a great deal to ponder in the meantime. I have no wish to denigrate doctors, but it should be remembered that they receive the merest tangible brush with the study of nutrition in their lengthy training. We, the public, are going to have to expect far higher standards of knowledge of food science and nutrition. As the pushier we get, the more our general practitioners are going to have to learn. Regrettably, being referred to dietitians is not the answer either, as you will appreciate from reading these books. Thank you for all your hard work and your very clear podcasts, concludes James. Thank you, James. Not sure how long you've been listening to the show, but I'm right on board with you. In fact, I have already read Metabolical, and I've read authors like Gary Taubes and Mark Hyman, and have talked about them on the special program that we did on low-carb/ketogenic eating. It absolutely astounds me that as we've increasingly consumed processed food and low-fat foods, the world has become sicker, and yet certain elements of the medical profession double down and essentially blame the patients when the advice the patients are being given is faulty and the food we are being marketed is damaging. It's a really unfortunate situation we find ourselves in, and a lot of it is perpetuated by very big companies with very big pockets to market their wares and also to advocate to government for no change despite the emerging science. So yes, Metabolical is good. I will read the other book that you mentioned as well. Mark Hyman, spelled Hyman, who has had a bit of a road to Damascus experience over all of this. He realized that the advice he was giving to his patients wasn't working. They were getting sicker, and he got into this area of what he calls functional medicine, where he believes that food is medicine, and if it's not medicine, it's poison. And I think that's a great way to view things. Whenever I think about putting something in my mouth, I ask myself that question. Is it medicine or is it poison? And it's amazing how easy it is then to just not eat something if you know that you're poisoning your system with sugary foods. Anyway, he has a new book out as well, which I have not read yet, called The Pegan Diet, Pegan. So it'll be interesting to catch up with that book at some stage. But regarding your point about the Apple Watch and WWDC, I think the reality is that we are not going to convince people who are willing to take the conventional medical advice out there that they should investigate this way of living, despite the fact that there are increasing credible reports of people whose diabetes have been completely eliminated by going ketogenic. I mean, it's a remarkable thing, but people just aren't willing to go there, and I suppose you have to meet people where they are while also advocating for further substantive changes. So if somebody is needing to measure their glucose level, I think it will be a really big accessibility win if a glucometer comes to the Apple Watch. So I guess I'm being a bit pragmatic about that. Christopher Wright says the only things that stand out to me from WWDC were the FaceTime features and SharePlay. It's great we can finally disable echo cancellation and noise suppression during calls, which should make them sound more significantly better. I also like the ability to share links. This should open the platform up to potentially anything running a Chromium browser. SharePlay is also very interesting. It sounds like it will send the audio in its original quality to everyone in the call, which is better than Zoom's implementation, which I've found highly irritating because it uses noise suppression aggressively, and there's no way to disable it even if you enable original sound. Hopefully it will be in stereo as well. I'm curious to try this with apps like Voice Dream Reader if the developer chooses to add the feature. The only feature that seems to be limited to devices with the A12 processor is the spatial audio for voices, which I don't really care about when talking to people. I'm also interested in the other intelligence features, such as the ability to extract pieces of information from images, but I'll have to wait until I get new hardware for that as well. I would have sprung for the 2020 iPhone SE, but since my 6S is still supported, I'll hold off until the SE is refreshed. I think it's excellent value for the money, and the omission of the UWB chip doesn't really bother me. As always, voiceover features are of particular interest, but we'll have to wait since Apple doesn't talk about those in great detail. I'm glad iOS 15 hasn't dropped support for older devices. My 6S will serve me well for another year. Sadly, my 2013 MacBook Air is no longer supported, and I have no plans to get a new model. Hopefully, it'll continue to run Windows 10 like a champ for many years to come. I'm curious what Apple has done in Monterey for VoiceOver users, although I'm not holding my breath. Apple's track record with VoiceOver on the Mac has been horrible. And it's a shame, especially with these new M1 Macs, which sound awesome from a technical standpoint. I'm disappointed that macOS seems to be the only thing that can run natively on them right now, which means you're stuck if you get one of them and realize you can't deal with VoiceOver's shortcomings. The Intel Macs rock. If it weren't for the ability to run Windows, I would have gotten rid of mine a couple of years ago, which would have been very sad. Hi, Jonathan, writes Darren McDougall. Thanks for the great rundown of the WWDC keynote the other day. I'm quite excited about iOS 15 and will be testing the public beta on secondary devices when it comes out. I've read that iOS 15 restores some iteration of the iOS 13 time and date picker wheels, which alone makes the upgrade worth it. I've also read word of some sort of drag and drop feature for copying and pasting photos or text from one app to another, so it will be interesting to see how VoiceOver works with that. From what I heard on your podcast about the new way of multitasking on iPad, it seems like it may be something I'm a little more likely to use. I learned how to multitask with VoiceOver in iPadOS 13, but honestly have forgotten since I never found the feature overly convenient. I'm also eager to test out the changes to the weather app and the offline Siri. In a final thought, it sometimes happens that I'm carrying my work iPhone with me after hours, And so the new focus setting will make sure Teams notifications and work emails don't show up in the evening. I look forward to giving all of this a try. Thanks, Darren. He has one more question I will come back to in just a moment. But just to say, I also hope that this will encourage more workplaces to allow people to use their own devices with eSIMs. If you can have your home phone number on a physical SIM and your work phone number on an eSIM, or vice versa, then you can have everything on one device and just have the apps that are appropriate to the task that you're doing come up based on focus. This is much better than carrying a second device that you have to charge and potentially could lose. And a question, says Darren, do we know when or if Apple Music Lossless will come to Sonos? Thanks for the great podcast. Darren, at the time of recording, I have not been able to find a definitive answer to this question, and I've been looking for it since Apple Music made the lossless announcement. But what you can do, which is quite impressive, is if you have a Sonos Arc soundbar, the one that supports Dolby Atmos, and if you have an Apple TV, and if that Apple TV is connected to a TV that is capable of the Dolby Atmos that Apple is sending, in other words, you're getting Dolby Atmos to the Arc, then you can, as long as you're running tvOS 14.6, use the Music app on the Apple TV to get not just lossless, but also Dolby Atmos music as well. Now, I have heard people expressing mixed feelings about the whole spatial audio thing, and I would be interested in what people think of it. If you've tried spatial audio this week, because it's been widely released now, what do you think? Is it the next generation of music listening, or do you feel like it's a bit of a gimmick? The negative feedback that I'm seeing seems to be coming from people who are listening with headphones. But if you listen to the full Dolby Atmos experience on a Sonos Arc or some sort of other Dolby Atmos capable system that's even better than the Arc that has separate speakers all over the place, the Dolby Atmos experience is just wonderful. Bonnie and I spent a lovely evening yesterday listening to some of the Dolby Atmos content, and they've got some playlists there. They also are showcasing the 2019 Dolby Atmos mix of Abbey Road. It was just amazing. But the best thing that I've heard on Dolby Atmos actually using this method was Grover Washington Jr.'s Just the Two of Us. I love that song, and of course it's got Bill Withers doing the vocals. But man, the Dolby Atmos mix they've made of this is just tremendous. So if you can do that with the Sonos, then that would be one way of experiencing some of the new things that Apple Music has to offer. But yeah, what we really want, is just the ability to stream that high-resolution audio. I'm hopeful that it will happen. If it doesn't happen, it'll be because of some sort of business decision on either Apple's or Sonos's part, because Sonos does play the lossless codec that Apple Music is using. So to the best of my knowledge, there's no technical reason why we are not going to have lossless on Sonos.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
This email, it's a hard one for me to read. It's from Jesse Tregarthen, and he says, "Hello, Jonathan and all. Thank you for the great podcast. I look forward to the notification every week that a new episode has been posted. I wanted to comment on the discussion about how we're sometimes treated by the medical profession. In 2016, I became a father to a beautiful boy named Obsidian. He was born 10 weeks early due to some complications and had to spend time in the neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU. This was a very difficult time for my partner and me. Lots of time spent dodging wires and tubes and getting to know what all the beeps and alarms meant. Quite a lot of the experiences we had were pleasant. Most of the nurses were amazing. I'll always have a special place in my heart for the NICU and the doctors and nurses who helped my little fighter through his first big hurdle. Unfortunately, some of the experiences we had were very disheartening and added a lot of stress to two scared young parents. Some of the experiences included somebody asking if there was somebody coming to take care of me when we were checking in for a procedure my partner was required to have because of pregnancy complications. I also had to complain to the charge nurse after the nurse assigned to my son refused to let me help bathe or bottle feed my son because she said these jobs were too visual. After that, somebody contacted Child Services, who opened a case against us. The basis of the whole thing turned out to be that they didn't believe I could be left alone with our son. I finally contacted the CNIB to get some advice on how to handle this. I was told to tell them that the CNIB would be willing to advocate on my behalf and would help me take it to court if it came to that. As soon as I told them this, they dropped the case, but not before telling us we should be thankful they found us to be fit parents and decided to close the case. I should have pursued this further, but as a new parent, I was just glad they were leaving me alone. I was also asked not to bring Obsidian to his pediatric appointments because I took up too much of the doctor's time, even though I could undress and dress him in less time than I was allotted to do so. Despite all this, Obsidian is now 4 years old and is a brilliant ball of energy with no signs of his premature birth. Now, there is more on a different topic from Jesse, but I'm just going to stop and say this really, I cannot articulate the emotions that an email like this makes me feel. It breaks my heart and it also makes me so angry. This is my worst nightmare. When Amanda, who was sighted, and I were bringing our children into the world, we picked the medical staff very carefully and we gave them a briefing. We made sure that they understood that I was going to be a full partner in the birthing process. We did a lot of education to avoid it because I really was very scared of this happening. Like you, Jesse, our little Heidi, when she was born, she was in neonatal for a while because she had hypoglycemia. And it is a very scary time. It's supposed to be such a happy occasion, and when the birth happens, it's just so wonderful, this miraculous thing. And then your little bundle of joy, all the things you've hoped for, has finally arrived, and they're connected to tubes and wired up, and there's all this uncertainty. It's deeply stressful. And then to have this crap on top of it, I just can't tell you how sorry I am that you went through that. And it shouldn't happen. And I know it does. I mean, I have heard through American organizations especially about advocacy endeavors because children have been confiscated from their perfectly capable blind parents just because of ignorance and bigotry and no one being willing to listen. It is so frightening. I'm glad you got it sorted out relatively easily, even though it would have been stressful. And your wee boy sounds amazing. Look after those times, they go quickly. Jesse continues on a lighter note. I wanted to respond to a question from a couple of weeks ago regarding the Amazon Fire tablets. I own the latest release of the 7-inch model. It can be slow, and the battery isn't great, but that's to be expected from a tablet at that price. I'm very impressed with the Voice View screen reader. I feel like it's the best of both worlds between TalkBack and VoiceOver. I feel like they identified some of the holes in TalkBack and filled them with parts of VoiceOver. I enjoy having the magic tap to play and stop music. It makes a great tablet for children, and I pay for the Amazon Kids Plus subscription, which provides lots of books, games, and shows tailored to my son's age and interests. I also use it to occasionally browse Facebook or listen to stations on the Sirius XM app. Our next contribution is asked to remain anonymous, but says that they are in the UK. I have had a range of experiences with healthcare from a blindness perspective. The first challenge can be access to information. In the UK, we do have an accessible information standard, which means medical information should be provided in a format of your choice. In practice, there are often problems getting this. This can lead to some strange needs to use workarounds, such as seeing AI, as you experienced with your jab. Anyone seeing this tech seems amazed at its capabilities, and fortunately, I have had people show interest rather than laugh. However, I had an appointment with a consultant who was very dismissive about the need to have accessible letters when a nurse raised it, and assumed that I would have a carer at home. This takes me on to my second point about medics' understanding of disability and the lives we can lead. For example, when the potential impacts on fertility of a surgery were discussed, the consultant said that this is not an issue for disabled people. To be fair, the nurse in the appointment was shocked and spoke to me afterwards, but I did not opt to have treatment with this provider. I think that part of the lack of understanding that blind people may hold down jobs, travel, and have families is because we ask medics to certify visual impairment when any sensible person should be able to use a registered blind certificate, a form we have in the UK where a medic has certified level of sight to see, for example, that a blind person cannot drive, but yet we insist on asking a GP to certify. My concern is that this can impact employment. For example, after time off due to a bereavement, I was sent to my work doctor. They only focused on my blindness, leaving me frustrated that the actual issue was not addressed. Another time, when I was really struggling due to negative treatments due to my blindness in work, the same failure to make adjustments, the same doctor argued that I needed therapy to adjust to not having the right adjustments. When a working version of JAWS and some scripts, which the government will fund, will enable a person to be a productive contributing member to the workforce, offering medical treatment to fix them feels harmful and counterproductive to me. I wonder how often blindness impacts the treatment we receive. Visual changes, e.g. blood in urine or rashes, are hard to describe, and some things are not something I want to ask a family member or someone on an app about. I can, however, use apps to get assistance with medical problems to good effect, e.g. I cut my arm cooking, and through a FaceTime with my friend could establish that the cut, while bleeding a lot, was fine with a plaster. Despite our inability to explain visual things well, I feel the biggest problem is attitudes. There is a lot of research about women and ethnic minorities having worse health outcomes with pain often undertreated. I feel that there is a general lack of confidence in a disabled person's account, and this can be worsened by the intersection of gender, ethnicity, or social class. Going to in-person appointments after work in a suit felt like it significantly changed the way the GP spoke to me, using longer words and more adult sentence structures. I wonder what as a community we can do to improve experiences of healthcare for blind people. My suggestions are as follows. 1. Share patient stories and voice. 2. Push that legislation affecting disabled people, for example the UK's Accessible Information Standard, is followed. 3. Give medics the opportunity to see capable blind people. Too often they are encountering elderly people who have lost sight and not had appropriate training. 4. Identify adjustments that can help a personal bugbear of mine, which is that despite Braille medicine packets in the UK, pharmacists often put the sticker details over this, and I either try and read through the sticker or peel off and hope not to destroy my Braille. 5. Advocate for what we really need. Too often I have seen people ask for a family member or carer to stay with them during appointments and tests as an adjustment. My belief is that for certain conditions this may be needed, and some people may get reassurance through it. But if appropriate guidance and descriptions are provided, a blind person does not need to be cared for, and this should not be a presumed right of exemption for COVID rules. 6. Compile a list of practical things that help. For example, when admitted to a hospital, I ask for the following: people to address me by name and say who they are and their job function. My bed, if possible, is close to a toilet, either in a side room or ward location that means I don't need to call for help. People tell me what they are doing and hand me medicines or touch my hand to where food or drink is. As unwell, I find it harder to pick up if these things have happened. I appreciate this is long. I think there is a lot more we need to think about on how the social model of disability can be understood by an audience whose role is in the medical model. Thank you so much, Lyra. Well, as you can hear on this show from time to time, there are lots of disabled people who are not yet on board with the social model of disability, and particularly if you've got medical staff who may have studied some years ago, perhaps they were just never exposed to training about how to properly work with disabled people, about expectations. But I think your summary there is absolutely right on. They think of us as medical problems. They're focusing on the impairment and not on the social model of disability. I wonder what goes on in medical schools these days, and I may well check this out actually in a New Zealand context. Is there a module where they talk about engaging properly, respectfully with disabled people? I did want to pick up on one thing you said because I think it's really important. I have noticed this too. If I'm wearing a suit, I'm far less likely to be patronized. Fortunately for me, it's kind of day wear for me in my present job, but I will not go to a doctor, unless I'm dragged in with some sort of major accident. I will not go to a doctor without wearing a suit because it does make a difference to how you're treated. It really does. Alison Fallon is back and she says, "Hello, Jonathan. I had a knee replacement in December of 2019. I went to a compulsory class before the surgery and wanted to record the class and was told that was not allowed. I had the surgery, and when it was time to discharge me, I was not permitted to record the discharge instructions. They told me that someone at home could read them to me. I said that that option was not acceptable, and ultimately I was allowed to record them, but only if there was an additional staff member in the room when the nurse read me the instructions. That policy hasn't changed." Thanks, Alison. Isn't so much of this the luck of the draw? I guess that's the case with any discrimination that we experience. You just sometimes get the luck of the draw and find somebody who is unreasonable. See, by way of contrast, I woke up a couple of years ago now. I was pretty new into this current job, which I started in June 2019, and I had such excruciating shoulder pain. It was really bad. I couldn't even dress myself. And I got sent to this specialist, this sort of sports specialist actually, and they did this thing called dry needling, which was instant relief. I walked in there basically unable to use one of my arms and walked out with complete movement restored. It was the most miraculous thing. But anyway, she actually volunteered this. She said, "I'm going to give you some exercises just to make sure that you completely recover from this, and you should do these things." And she said, "Why don't you give me your iPhone and I'll record it in the voice memos app for you. That way, you've got the exact instructions." And I said, what a genius idea. So she actually came up with that. So you have good and bad experiences, don't you? This email comes from Matt Campbell. "Hi, Jonathan. Here's a provocative discussion topic for Mosen at large in case you need one. Sometimes I feel like we're fighting an uphill battle trying to get software developers to implement accessibility, especially developers that write their own GUI toolkits." Narrator's note: GUI is spelled GUI, and it stands for Graphical User Interface. Matt continues, "There are so many GUI toolkits out there, and the vast majority of them are completely inaccessible with a screen reader. I participate in a couple of discussion sites for programmers, and from time to time I'll see a posting about a new or obscure GUI toolkit on one of these sites. Invariably, when I run the demo app, it's completely inaccessible. Thankfully, I'm no longer the only one calling attention to this problem. A common response is that the platform accessibility APIs, like UI automation on Windows, are hard to implement, especially in a cross-platform toolkit or application. And, based on my experience, I have to agree. As you know, iOS 14 introduced screen recognition, which uses machine learning to identify not only the text on the screen, but the structure of the UI. There's nothing stopping Microsoft, Google, and Amazon from implementing something like this as well for their respective platforms. So, this makes me wonder if the battle to get developers to directly implement accessibility is now a waste of time. I'll be sad if, in the future, it takes a cutting-edge processor or a connection to a cloud service to provide the same level of real-time access to a GUI that we had on a Pentium in the 90s. But I also realize that it's impractical to expect the long tail of developers to go to great lengths to accommodate us. We may argue that these developers should just use the platform's standard controls, but there are reasons why they don't, and we won't change that. I'm thinking of starting an open source project to make it easier for developers to make their custom GUI implementations accessible, so they don't have to implement UI automation and all of the other platform accessibility APIs. But I wonder if VoiceOver's screen recognition and the imitators that I'm sure will follow has made this work irrelevant. Thanks, Matt. I guess I feel like there's probably some middle ground. Interestingly, what you are arguing is what Accessiby has been arguing in the context specifically of websites, that basically we're losing the battle in terms of traditional accessibility paradigms and it's time for something new. I guess what the community has been saying to Accessiby, though, is that what they're offering is actually an inferior experience to what we had before. I don't think we can afford to be too purist about this. We've got a high unemployment rate. Things are pretty dire for us, despite all of the technological advances that we've had in the last 3 decades especially. So if anything can be done to make more jobs available by making more things accessible, and they actually work, then I think it's worth checking out. It's a very interesting discussion, and I look forward to anyone else who wants to contribute on this, and also to your evolving thinking on this, Matt. Corey Ballard is writing in and says, "Afternoon, Jonathan. I thought I would reach out and ask the pro a quick question." Well, no pressure. I do have a twice-weekly live webinar with a coworker, and we broadcast using Zoom. We have a pretty good setup using Open Broadcast Studio for the visual side, and use an A&H Z10FX for our mixer. Where we struggle is that Zoom will only accept 2 channels of sound. Most of our sessions would have at least 3 sound sources, usually 2 mics, and then a computer or smartphone. Is there a good way to connect a mixer to a computer so that Zoom will accept all of our channels? Thanks so much for the help. Corey, sadly I'm not going to be much help. I know that the Z10FX is a digital mixer. I have the Allen and Heath Z22FX, and it is an analog mixer. So in that case, all of the channels go out to Zoom. It is no problem to have all of those 22 channels sending audio to Zoom, because what Zoom is receiving is simply a stereo signal. So if there's a way to simply take the stereo output that's coming from all channels and send it into Zoom, even if you have to do that in an analog way, like if you could take, say, a couple of RCAs going from a line output of the mixer that hears all sound and send it into an audio interface, then you'd be able to use all the channels. I think the issue is relating to the fact that the digital signal is only sending a pair of channels, but because I am not directly familiar with the mixer, I don't know if there was a workaround for this. What I would suggest you do is give Allen and Heath a call or get in touch with them on the email. In the limited number of times I've had to contact them, they have been very helpful. However, there may well be other blind people out there in the Mosen at Large community who have this Z10FX mixer from Allen and Heath and could potentially give you some pointers. Alternatively, there are people with all sorts of mixers and audio combinations on the Blind Podmaker email list, and it could be worth subscribing there to see if anyone else can help you. You can drop an email to creators-subscribe@theblindpodmaker.com if you want to join that. It's a really good list. Lots of interesting audio discussion there. Creators-subscribe@theblindpodmaker.com. But if you have an answer for Corey, please let us know. We will be interested in it. Maribel wrote in during the Melbourne lockdown and says, "Hi Jonathan, greetings from locked down Melbourne for 7 days at least. I enjoy getting your updates and noticed you are going to be talking about all things Apple on the next podcast. I am a PC user and wondered if you have a podcast you can point me to where you talk about using Windows 10 with JAWS. I have a new computer and just can't get started, as it is so different to the one I am on now, which runs Windows 7. I feel like such a tech dinosaur while I hear Apple zooming you into a parallel universe. I think if I could find some podcasts describing how to get JAWS and Windows 10 working together, I might like to get into the driver's seat right now. I am limping along on the old system. Thanks, Maribel. I think your best resource would be the JAWS training material. If you go to the Help menu in JAWS, which is just the same structure on Windows 10 as it is in Windows 7, and you choose Training, you will find the JAWS Basic Training, which has been substantially updated to accommodate Windows 10. There are many other training resources if you go to freedomscientific.com/training, and there is now a Freedom Scientific training podcast that I recommend you subscribe to every week. They are dealing with different applications, different aspects of the operating system. If you are wanting to make the most of your computer, it is a very informative listen. So this is one of the great things about Freedom Scientific, is that they invest a lot in their training resources. So start with the basic training, work your way up from there, and I wish you all the best with the new toy. Hour number 3 of Mosen at Large is already coming up. Time flies when you're having fun. The Bonnie Bulletin is here in a moment. We're here till 5 p.m. US Eastern Time, at which point we cut way over to Canada for Steve Catway. He's got more version comparisons. At 7 o'clock, it's Dan Sweeney with One Hit Wonders. We're live with the Snowman from Iowa at 8. And at 11, we go to South Africa for Gary and a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Mushroom FM.
From Melbourne to Montreal, Mumbai to Monterey, serving the planet. The home of the fun guys. Mushroom
FM. Mosen at Large Podcast.
If you would like to be in touch with the show, you are welcomeness. And you can do that by dropping me an email with an audio attachment or in written form to Jonathan, that's JONATHAN, at mushroomfm.com. You can also tweet with the Mushroom FM hashtag. You just write the number sign and Mushroom FM, squish it all together in a tweet. It'll get to us here and you can track that hashtag as well. If you would like to call and leave a voicemail message, the listener line number to do that is 864-60-MOSEN in the United States, 864-606-6736. And you can also leave a message in the chat box if you happen to be tuned in via Facebook and YouTube. Now, someone who has done that is Christian. And he says, what do I think of the idea of having Siri on Sonos itself now that Siri is open to third parties? I have to say, I'm completely underwhelmed by that idea, Christian. Siri is just so finicky and it doesn't know much, at least not at the moment, you know. So I don't know if I would want to forsake the soup drinker in favor of Siri. I don't think I would. I think I'm quite happy to, when I want to engage with Siri, I'll talk to the phone. You can, of course, AirPlay things to the Sonos that way. I don't think I would want Siri being my voice assistant on the Sonos, but I'm all for the choice if people want it. That beautiful music signifies the arrival of another Bonnie Bulletin, live this time with Bonnie Mosen.
Hi, everybody. Hi, guys.
We could give you a round of applause if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great to have you back.
Yeah, we do that at our romance writers meeting.
Now, we need to try and keep up our impeccable record, because last week we had this heart-to-heart talk about the need for us not to talk over each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a form of therapy, because this podcast is now being transcribed, and we have had incidents where the Bonnie Bulletin was full of the dreaded word crosstalk, where we were talking at the same time, and the transcriber couldn't figure out what the deuce is going on. So they just put crosstalk. And last week, we had a perfect score.
Oh, that's great. I wonder what the Senate gets.
The Senate's normally actually quite well behaved, isn't it? I find it ironic that in America, everyone, well, not everyone, that's a huge generalization, sorry. In America, there's so much brashness and people not listening to one another and people just being mean and rude and horrible. And yet when you go into the Senate, it's quite genteel still.
It's tradition.
Yeah.
Can't fight tradition.
Well, why can't that tradition be kind of transferred to the general public discourse then?
I don't know. I mean, you think about a news show, and I'm sure there's lots of cross-talking on Crossfire, or lots of cross-talking on Meet the Press.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw Crossfire when CNN came to New Zealand in 1990, and I was just gobsmacked. I thought, wow, can't they all just wait for each other to finish?
Or any press conference, because they all talk over each other there.
Yeah. Well, I have some interesting news to report, and this is that we sort of have moved into our building now. This is the new national office of the organisation for which I work, and we've moved into it now. And we had a listener who was asking the question about whether you might use a Zoom PodTrack P4 in a work context to sort of have all of your devices coming through one set of headphones. And that's what really inspired me to buy it. And I have to say, it's working like a dream.
That's great.
So in my office, I have a lapel microphone, my lovely Sony lapel microphone that I can clip onto me, and that's going into one of the inputs in the PodTrack. Then I have the iPhone going into the special input for the iPhone on channel 3 of the PodTrack, and I also have the PC connected via Zoom. So I can hear everything. I can hear notifications from my phone when I'm using my computer. When I'm doing video or audio conferencing or taking phone calls, I can use my high quality mic. If I need to record any of it, I can for reference or anything like that. And it's just marvelous. The one caveat though is that because there's no mix minus really between the PC and the phone, if I'm on a conference on my PC, I have to remember to wind the channel down from the phone because I was having a conversation on Teams on my PC in the office and some breaking news notification or other came through and it was, clear as day to the people on the other end of the Teams call. But so that is another use for the PodTrack P4, to use it as a little mini mixer in a work environment. So thank you to the genius, and I don't remember who suggested this. I'm sorry, a listener a few weeks ago, because thanks to you, I bought this PodTrack P4, and it's working beautifully in that context.
I'm sure they'll reveal themselves.
I'm sure. And our Chief Operations Officer listens to Mosen at Large sometimes.
Yeah.
His favourite segment is the Bonnie Bulletin.
That's
and so
scary.
He came into my office and he said, oh, so this is the PodTrack P4. he knew all about it. So that's fantastic. And we've had a bit of drama with technology.
Yeah, the washing machine is still working, but they've managed to update its controller or something. They're doing something with its controller because it's downloaded and it's still loading. So either it's the biggest controller on Earth or something's wrong, because I tried using the washing machine Friday, I guess it was, and it wouldn't work from the controller. And I did manage to get it turned on by the Alexa.
Oh.
But sorry, guys. And but it got stuck in some sort of loop. I don't know what happened. So Heidi and Henry had to come over and force it out of its cycle. So it does still work, but you can't control it by the app, and you can't change what setting it's on. It's stuck on cotton.
I'm nervous about this because the background here is that I was reading this book by James Patterson and Bill Clinton. They've come out with a second book. The first one was called The President is Missing. You read that, didn't you?
Yes.
Did you like that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was good. Now they've come out with this different one, a different president. It's called The President's Daughter, but it's not the same president as the one who was missing. I hope you're keeping up.
Yeah,
So
it's not the same. That president had a lot of bad luck. If he was missing, then his daughter was missing.
despite my tiredness, on Thursday night I got to the point where I had to finish the book. So I kept reading, and eventually I did finish the book. And I went to check my mail. One should never do this before drifting off to sleep. It's really bad practice. But I quickly checked my mail, and it was an email from our handy-dandy Synology network-attached storage device. And the email said, your Synology lost power at, I think it was 10:45 or something around that time, PM. I thought, oh my goodness, what's happened here? And so the first thing I did was check with Siri whether we could still hear Mushroom FM. And we could not. Finally, it dawned on me I should actually just check my battery status. And I checked my battery status and it said 95% not charging, even though it was plugged in. So I realized our power had been cut-rated. By this stage, it was like 11:30, so it had been off for quite a while. And in New Zealand, we have multiple power companies, electricity companies, that you can choose from. My understanding is that's not really the case in the US, is it?
Not really. I mean, every kind of state has its own power company. Some have two, but usually it's just one for each state. There's not like a federal power company.
Right. In New Zealand, it's all been deregulated, and so there are so many power companies, and they all compete for your business. You know, sign up for a 10-year contract with us, and we'll give you an iPad. All sorts of stuff. We've signed up with one that said if we agree to sign up with them for a year, they'll give us free electricity every weekend. So we've done that, and that's nice. Anyway, I called our particular power company and talked to their faults person, and they said yes, they had been notified that there was an outage in our area, and it might be until 3 a.m. until it was fixed. They said, have you got anybody there who's medically dependent? And I said, no, we haven't, but we've got people all around the world who are dependent on Mushroom FM, and now Mushroom FM's not working, and she didn't seem terribly interested in what
that's
Mushroom
not a
FM.
medical crisis.
Oh.
It's just a crisis to listeners.
So you talked over me just then.
Sorry.
But luckily I stopped. And so then this is the first time we've had a big power cut since Henry, the Wonder son-in-law, and I built the new Mushroom Pod, the great beast of a computer that powers Mushroom FM. And we set it up in the BIOS so that it's supposed to automatically start itself up when power is recovered. But I'd never seen it do it, and I wanted to make sure. So what I did was I went to sleep with one hearing aid in my ear, mindful that when you connect your phone to power, it always wakes up and VoiceOver speaks. So I knew that when the power came back on, VoiceOver would yell in my ear, and I would be able to run down and check the Mushroom FM computer down in the studio and hopefully get back to sleep. So that all happened. 2:17 a.m. it came back, and it yelled at me and woke me up, and I went down and checked, and it did indeed wake up. But why this is relevant is, so we've got two things, and I don't know if they're related. The morning after that power cut was when the washing machine got weird, but the washing machine is saying it was downloading a, what did they call it?
New control, device controller.
Yeah, device controller. And I don't know whether it got upset because the power went off and maybe there was a surge, but I don't think so because everything else seems to be working okay. So if you've got a Samsung smart washer called the, what's?
Quick Drive.
Quick Drive. Sounds like going into hyperspace. And actually, when you touch the panel, it sounds like you're going into hyperspace.
It does, yeah. I mean, it still works. It's just you can't use it from the app, which is annoying.
So that makes me think it's not related to that power cut. But when you have two things happening in rapid succession like that, you can't help wondering.
Yeah. So hopefully it will straighten itself out eventually. Because, I mean, cotton, most things have cotton in them, but everything's going to wash on cotton from now to eternity.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous about the Samsung support as well.
Yeah.
And what I've said to Heidi is, when she gets a chance to come over, maybe we'll contact tech support then, because I don't really want to bring the whole VoiceOver thing into the mix. I just don't want to deal with that.
What I'm afraid they'll say is, well, it has Braille on the washer, which does, but that doesn't help us.
No, it's about the output, not the input.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's a shame because after being such a Luddite about the idea of us having a newfangled washing machine with an app, you were really digging it.
Yeah, it's a great washer. Now it doesn't work.
Yeah, now it doesn't work.
I mean, it works. It just doesn't work as well as it did. I mean, it still is doing what it's supposed to be. At least it was yesterday. So,
which sort of vindicates your Luddity in the first place. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Is validity a word?
Yeah, I
That's
mean
a big word.
that is true on some levels. I was thinking about this the other day, that if I were a teacher, I wonder if and I can just see the backlash from parents and kids if I were to do this, if I were a teacher, where I would have a day or some, like one day a month, where the kids could not use any kind of technology. But they would have to use pencil and paper, or they would have to use calculators or whatever. But they'd have to actually look in a book, because there may come a time. I mean, think about it. It's a survival thing, because when you don't have the technology, you're pretty much dysfunctional. I mean, you can't do anything, or you think you can't do anything. And I'm not sure that humans are being taught those survival skills. I mean, we remember when there was an internet and when we didn't have iPhones. But the generation now doesn't. And, you sometimes, particularly with the pandemic, and natural disasters, you sometimes got to get back to a little basic so you could at least function.
It's amazing how vulnerable the internet is too, because earlier this week there was this massive outage of one particular provider that powers a lot of the big websites, like I think, was it Amazon affected, and
Amazon
the BBC
affected.
and the Guardian and PayPal, a lot of really big players. And apparently it was supposedly caused by one provider's configuration going rogue and taking the whole thing out. The internet's incredibly vulnerable, and one day we will have some sort of massive coordinated cyber attack that knocks a lot of things out, and it's just amazing and a bit scary how much is dependent on the internet. Yeah. But in America, you've got these survivalists, haven't you? They're in these bunkers and
a lot of them are out west in Montana in places, and I have to laugh because I had this picture in my head, because every time there's a presidential election, one of the groups goes underground. So I had this picture, like when Trump got elected, was he standing there with Obama and handing over the keys? Okay, now your people can go into the ground. And then 4 years later, was he standing there with Biden going, okay, now here, and Obama hands over the keys to Trump. Because
the one that makes me laugh is when some new political figure is elected, you always now, every 4 years, you always get this surge of tweets from people to say,
"That's not my president."
They say that, but what I was thinking was they say, "I'm moving to New Zealand."
Yes.
And it's really funny when you hear Republicans doing it.
Yeah.
And I write back and I say, mate, do you realize that we've got an unmarried mother who's an atheist as our prime minister? And all these, we've got a nationalized healthcare system, all these things that you stand against, and yet you say just because your guy didn't win, or girl, you're moving to New Zealand.
I think they want to because they think it's the furthest place away. It's more, I like to calmly point out that they wouldn't let people in because we have such a strong immigration policy that it's not that simple. You think it's really easy to get up and switch countries, but trust me, it's not.
It is very complicated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unless you, I don't know, go somewhere that most people wouldn't go. They might take you in. I don't know. But
anything else happening that you want to remark upon?
No. Just talking about the doomsday preppers or the bunker people. There is a show, or used to be a show on Discovery or History Channel, one of those that used to actually show programs and now has more reality-based stuff, called the Doomsday Preppers. And they would show their little bunkers or silos or whatever they've moved into, and some of them are quite elaborate. So
now, Peggy Kern is commenting on the Twitter. She says, at one point when our water heater was updating the control module, or whatever it is called, they ended up creating a brand new app. You might want to look in the App Store and see if there is another app for your washer.
That's interesting. Didn't we do that, though?
Well, what I suggested we do on your phone as a test was delete the Samsung SmartThings app and reinstall it, and I believe we've done that. But it's interesting because I did read that a SmartThings app update is coming. I mentioned that to you a couple of days.
Yeah, and that's what I thought had happened.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess the other big news at work, I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Well, no, not just me. We've all been waiting for a month now for them to finish working on our building. They're doing some cosmetic repair, like water blasting and painting, and it. So there's been like a cherry picker outside my window for several weeks, which is very loud. And I commented the other day, I've seen skyscrapers go up quicker than this.
But this must mean that you're very talented.
Why?
Because companies like to cherry pick their talent, and it's
I
right
know,
outside your window.
Outside my window, yes.
Yeah.
With their very loud music and singing and dancing. And you kind of want to yell out, hey guys, if you stop the singing and dancing, we might be able to get this done quicker.
Well, I'm involved in building something new, as I mentioned last week. So we are getting very close to the launch of Small World.
Yeah.
And I did, if you want to go back to last week's episode, I did mention the Small World show. It's a great privilege to have the chance to revive this iconic New Zealand children's radio show. And later in the week, and on this live show next week, we will be talking to the creator, the broadcasting and entertainment icon, Don Linden. You've heard that interview, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was very good.
And I have now produced the first episode because I was just so petrified about doing it. I thought I just have to get on with it. You feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yep.
So I've done the first one now. Yeah.
Cool. But the worst thing about our building, hopefully yours won't be as noisy as ours, is the fact that Eclipse's toilet area has been taken over by scaffolding.
Oh, no. That's very inconsiderate.
Well, they kept telling them, but they didn't seem to think they needed to be there to paint and stuff.
Well, I hope it all works out for you.
Yep.
More important, though, I hope that our washing machine revives
Yeah,
itself.
revive. Well, and again, it is working. We just have to get the app situation straightened out. At first, I thought it had been hacked or something.
Oh, my goodness, you're such a drama.
I'm like, who hacked the washing machine? But didn't someone hack a coffee maker once? And it kept spewing out coffee?
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
I think I read that. It was kind of like the magic pot.
We have a washing machine manufacturer here, which is actually quite highly regarded in the United States, called Fisher and Paykel. And there's an Easter egg, and for those who don't know that term, an Easter egg is where there's some hidden feature buried away that you have to know how to get to. And quite a lot of software has Easter eggs. Like in the Brown Note, we put a Dean Jackson Easter egg in to remember Dean after he died. And that one got known pretty well and quickly.
Oh, I don't think I ever knew about that.
Yeah, I can't remember how you did it
Darn.
now. Somebody will. Some
I
people
don't have a Braille note anymore.
Some people remember more about
Anything hidden in
my
the
work
mantis?
than I do.
Yeah.
Where was I going with this?
About
the
the
Easter
washing
egg.
machine.
Yeah. So the Fisher and Paykel washing machines, you can make them play the New Zealand national anthem.
I'm not sure what our washing machine's singing. It has so many songs that, when it gets done with the laundry, it's doody doody doo. It plays this song for a few minutes. I'm like, okay.
Appliances from that part of the world, they love their jingles, don't they? It's
Well, at
really
least you
cool.
know what's going on with them, which
Yeah.
is good. It's sort of a built-in accessibility feature that maybe wasn't necessarily planned.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we'll keep you informed about the saga of the washer.
Yes.
We are hoping for good things. What I think I will do is I will write up the situation today and try and initiate a written tech support thing with Samsung, because then I don't have to mention the blindness. Although I am tempted to say this is actually particularly inconvenient for us because it's our primary interface to the washing machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dilemma. Right, well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
another absolutely stunning Bonnie Bulletin.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yep.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Hi, Jonathan. Great to listen to your podcast. You do a great job as usual. Having heard earlier this year you swapped over to a Dell computer, I just did the same in the last couple of days. I got the XPS 13-inch top spec. I love it. But I find when I'm trying to plug in my headphones and listen to JAWS or anything like that, the sound is very spatial. I'm not sure how to turn that off, even though I went into Windows and Sound and toggled the off spatial sound. Also, I use a Bluetooth keyboard, a Logitech K780, And even though I've downloaded the software and ticked to use the function keys as F1 to F12, it doesn't seem to want to do this. Any thoughts on that one? I was using it on a HP laptop before and had no problem. Any help would be appreciated.
I'll do my best, Michael. First, congratulations on getting a new Precious, a new shiny. It is always nice to get something new and shiny, but slightly frustrating when you've got just those minor configuration things that aren't quite working the way that you want. Let's deal with these two issues. First, the function keys issue. That's easily fixed. Press the FN key with escape, and that toggles function lock. So if you press FN with escape, you will get the function keys behaving like normal function keys. Press FN with escape again. It'll go back to its default state of making the function keys perform their special Dell-related function. Of course, when you want to get either of the other states that is not the default, you hold down the FN key. The audio in the Dell is really nice, but some of it does have a detrimental effect on screen reader sound, particularly with headphones. To get around this, I believe the utility is called Max Audio Pro, but I certainly recall that it wasn't accessible and that I needed sighted assistance with Ira to get this fixed. You have to go in there and make sure that you don't have any equalization settings enabled, certainly for headphones. It doesn't seem to matter so much for speakers, but for the headphones, it's good to just get a flat signal coming into your headphones. And you can disable all of those settings in that utility, but it's not accessible. Good luck with your new Dell. I really like my XPS 15. Boy, it is fast. It's the fastest laptop that I've ever had, and I use it more as a result. It's not as thin and light as some laptops I've had in the past, but because this is such a good performer, it means that I get my audio editing done more quickly because it's got lots of horsepower. I don't feel like it's slowing me down. It's a very fast, gorgeous machine, this XPS 15. I'm really happy with it, but I still do not have an update that Matthew Horsball said he's got for his XPS 13, where the home and end functions are now back on the function with left and right arrow keys. I hope you get that, Michael, on your XPS 13, because Matthew had an XPS 13. It has not turned up on my XPS 15 yet. If anybody has an XPS 15, and they've got the home and end keys working on function with left and right arrow again after a firmware update, I'd be interested in hearing about that, because I hope vainly so far every time I get a new update that it's going to fix it today, because that's the one thing that really annoys me about this laptop. I guess what makes it tolerable is that a lot of the time I'm using my Mantis anyway, which has a QWERTY keyboard that I like to use, and I can use the home and end keys in that way, sort of bypassing the keyboard on the Dell itself, which is a lovely keyboard to type on. This email is from David Zimowski. Good to hear from you, David. I remember our FS Cast interview way back when with fondness, and he says, "Hi, Jonathan. I'm curious to know if anyone using JAWS has a way to navigate iTunes. I don't know if John Martin still tries to make it work with his program. I don't know how to get to the left pane where the library and list of artist folders is. I had it and lost it and don't know any command to get it back. Any help would be welcome. Thank you, David. iTunes has changed a lot, and I'm afraid I'm one of those people who finds it really bloated and convoluted and just more bother than it's actually worth. The only thing that I use iTunes for is to make an encrypted backup of my iPhone, particularly at times when we're playing with early iOS betas. You could try seeing what's in the view menu to make sure that what you are wanting is not hidden, and usually F6 is your friend. F6 moves you between major panes in iTunes, which can sometimes be a major pain. If anybody has any hints on this, any scripts that they know about, then please share them with us.
Hi, Jonathan. It's John Moore. I just read the latest transcript. I wanted to chime in a little bit about your comments about recording things. I have to say, I agree with you 100%. I view making recordings like having cameras. It amazes me how many people don't seem to understand that we would like to preserve things too, and they get hostile if you even mention that you want to record something in audio, and yet they have video cameras themselves, and they're always shooting video. I think it's safe to say that I consider it the exact same thing. And it's the same concept. I use Olympus recorders and core sound binaural microphones personally. Those have worked out for what I prefer to use, and they work perfectly. And so those are what I use, but to each his own. I just wanted to say that I agree with you 100%, and I think that it's great how you did that. And, you inspired a lot of us with the old Bloggy Bits podcast to start doing it ourselves. And I still do it. When I go to the amusement park next weekend, I'm going to be making a lot of recordings with binaural microphones, without binaural microphones, and even the Apple Watch. So I'm going to be making a lot, and it's for that reason that you were talking about. You want to preserve your memories, and I think that a recorder is the best way to do that. I do understand that sometimes it is not wise to record, and I try to honor people who do not want to be recorded whenever I can. But I also feel that preserving memories is best done with recording for me as a blind person. Text fades away, and it doesn't convey the same meaning. I would love for you to start doing some more binaural recordings again. Those were a lot of fun, especially when you tried to play air hockey on that one podcast, or when you went on the slingshot. That's still one of the funniest ride recordings I have ever heard from anyone. And I'm a ride enthusiast who makes recordings all the time.
Gosh, I had completely forgotten about the Bloggy Bits podcast, to be honest, John. That is going way back. I think that was one of the first podcasts I did in around 2004, and we did keep that going for a while. So it's nice that you remember that far back with so much fondness. You are so right that text doesn't have the same meaning. And as I mentioned in the episode when we discussed this, I'm so glad that I have all of these recordings of my children. But something really interesting happened when I was going through those recordings for David's 21st and putting a montage together. I found a recording of my dad, who was on a recording with David, and I don't have a lot of audio of my dad, and he died 4 years ago, and I really regret not having more audio of him. So that was actually the first time that I'd heard his voice since he died. I'd forgotten that I had this recording, actually, and nothing can substitute for hearing a voice like that. Nothing can. This email is from Angus McKinnon, who writes, Jonathan, do you ever use something like the FIO, that's FIIO Q1 Mark II DAC? No, I don't, Angus. DAC, by the way, is a digital to analog converter. I have not used one of these or anything like it. And I assume you may be asking this question because of the changes coming to Apple Music, where you will be able to get not just lossless, but high-resolution music. And certainly the high-resolution music will benefit from a good quality digital to analog converter. It's not something I have tried, and if anybody has and wants to share product recommendations and the quality of the user experience, then my audio geeky heart would be gladdened by your contribution. Send it in by email or with an audio attachment, maybe using your digital to analog converter, to jonathan@mushroomfm.com, the listener line number 86460 Mosen, 864-606-6736.
Jonathan Mosen, Mosen at Large Podcast.
This email is from Pam Francis, who writes, Hello, Jonathan. What is your opinion concerning Apple's decision to make their computers in such a way that you cannot replace parts? I got one of the last Apple computers that will allow you to take it apart. I don't know if I want another one, given that I cannot have it repaired properly. I think Apple does this on purpose to create obsolescence. The price is also cost prohibitive. Thanks, Pam. I know that there is a lot of debate about this. There are right to repair bills that are going through various legislatures in the United States. Maybe some have already passed. And I know that a number of manufacturers, Apple included, are quite vociferous in their lobbying against this kind of legislation. I think, to Apple's credit, that Macs do last quite a long time. And I'm not sure that Apple's the only culprit here. You do get computers where something seemingly innocuous happens, like you've got a USB port that stops working. And actually, I had this issue with a 2012 MacBook Air that I owned. And I'm careful with my stuff. I wasn't misusing it in any way. But one day I tried to insert something into the USB port, and it wouldn't go in. Something had happened to the USB port. And I called Apple. I think this was about maybe a year after I got it, so 2013. Not that long, given the supposed quality of Apple's stuff and how long they really should last. And I called Apple support, and they said, oh gosh, I've never heard of this before. And I Googled on it, and it was a really common problem. The Apple forums were littered with people who had this problem with the MacBook Air USB port. And I called them back, and I said, listen, the internet's full of people having the same issue as me. You've got a manufacturing defect here. And even if that were not the case, unless you can clearly prove that I have misused the equipment, we have law in New Zealand called the Consumer Guarantees Act, and that overrides any manufacturer's warranty. If it is fair and reasonable to expect a product to last longer than it has, then it's up to the manufacturer to put it right, regardless of what the guarantee or the warranty says. The law of the land basically overrides whatever they say. And so they did fix it, but to fix it, they actually had to open it up and rip out the entire motherboard just for one USB port and put the new motherboard in. And I guess that's how intricately woven these manufacturing processes are now. But Apple's not unique in that regard. There are many laptops that are complex in this way, where everything's just really clearly associated with the motherboard. I am pretty zen about this. I guess we're protected in New Zealand by the fact that we do have that legislation. It is pretty robust, and it's on the side of the consumer. But I think if you abandoned Apple for this reason, you're probably going to get a very similar problem with any capable manufacturer these days. And I do know people who are using quite elderly Macs by technological computing standards who are getting good value out of them. Dawn writes, hi Jonathan, I heard you talking about writing Braille when iOS devices are connected to the Mantis. I went straight to mine and Bluetoothed to my iPhone. When I tried to use Braille input, I discovered it would only allow me to use the typewriter keyboard. I pressed F12, which is the hotkey that toggles the keyboard input, but couldn't manage to get it to switch between input methods. Is this an iOS problem? If so, it is a great shortcoming on Apple's part. As far as a sound or vibration that tells you when the phone is active, I am with you all the way. Thank you, Dawn. No, you cannot use the Braille keyboard emulation mode in anything but the programs on the Mantis itself. That is a function that belongs to the Mantis software, and it doesn't translate to terminal mode. I'm really relaxed about that. If I wanted to Braille into my iPhone, I could have chosen another device. I want to be able to type into iPhone with the QWERTY keyboard precisely because of the bizarre Braille input anomalies that we've talked about extensively in recent weeks, with many listeners contributing on that subject. I don't perceive this to be an Apple issue. I guess there might be a way for Humanware, who do the software for APH, to make this available in terminal mode, but I think that is actually at the APH/Humanware end.
Mushroom FM.
Greg says, I have been thinking quite a bit about 2 points you have been raising over the last few weeks, the one-eyed man and blind pride, and frankly struggling with them. In large part, this comes from a belief that you have a great deal of misconception of what having the sense of vision is like. For example, your one-eyed man assertion that he would be distracted by an overload of visual stimulus is just absurdly removed from reality, as anyone experiencing visual distraction can easily close their eyes. You, and several others who apparently have been blind from birth, equate vision with data. Again, this is absurd. From an evolutionary standpoint, in comparison to other species, vision is by far the most developed of the human senses, and losing it is a major disability, And while blind people do face discrimination in many ways, including ignorance of our capabilities, I don't see how we can advance our cause by untruthful assertions as if blindness is not a disability at all. I am not either proud or ashamed of being blind. If I had the choice, I would love to get my sight fully or partially restored. I am proud of how I have accepted my blindness and of who I am as a person, blind or otherwise. We do need to advance the cause of the place of blind people in our society and equal opportunity and justice. But we must do so with honesty and integrity, and laughably absurd assertions minimizing the loss of vision only make us look ridiculous and rejection out of hand. If blind pride moves that forward, I'm all for it. But, and it's a big but, we can't misrepresent what blindness is any more than, we should allow sighted people to put false limitations on us. Thank you, Greg. Some of the most eloquent emails on the subject that we've received have come from Andrew Walker, who said in his email that he has been sighted and went blind later in life as an adult. And it was because of Andrew's email that I dug out the one-eyed man speech that I delivered in 2016. So adventitiously and congenitally blind people alike, and adventitiously and congenitally disabled people alike, are increasingly subscribing to the social model of disability. I also think you contradict your own argument when you talk about vision being the most developed sense. It absolutely is, and that's why if the one-eyed man had vision, he would not close his eyes. He would be distracted in a society that was not built for vision if you were in the kingdom of the blind. That's the point of the example. The point of the example is to illustrate the social model of disability, which I accept is taking a long time to gain any kind of foothold in the United States. But it is a model that has been adopted here. It's a really empowering model. It gives disabled people the confidence and the mandate to demand that society stop making disabling choices. The social model of disability says that blindness is not a disability, and that's what I believe. It's not a matter of being dishonest or lacking integrity just because I don't agree with you. I believe it because when you subscribe to the social model of disability, what you're saying is that we all have impairments of different kinds. If you are short and you can't reach a particular shelf, then you are disabled by bad design. Luckily, in a situation as simple as that, you can usually find an accommodation to mitigate that disability, which is standing on a stool. Some impairments are more severe than others and have greater consequences than others, and certainly the consequences of having a vision impairment are significant. But they're not significant because of the vision impairment itself. They're significant because of the choices society has chosen to make around the construction of society. If a lot of information about my environment was provided textually or audibly, then the fact that I'm blind would be less disabling than it is. That's the whole point of the social model of disability. And those of us who do promote it are making inroads. Because when I explain this to a wide range of audiences, they get it. They understand actually that there are many things that disable them for whatever reason. And some are mitigated, and some are not. And it's time that we mitigated as many as possible. Now, I accept that not everybody is there. People are at varying stages, particularly those who've gone through the very disturbing upheaval of having lost a sense that is so dominant and that it is so easy naturally to depend on, and then you suddenly can't depend on it anymore. I've had no experience of that, except that I do have deteriorating hearing, and so I do relate to it in that sense. I know what it is like to rely on something and then find that you can't rely on it as much anymore, or if you've had some sort of accident that has taken your sight away immediately, you've never had that adjustment at all. Suddenly you had it, now you don't. That is a major, major thing to adjust to, and I don't minimize that at all. People's perspective on blindness and disability will vary, but it isn't some sort of clear arbitrary distinction between the congenitally and adventitiously disabled, as this show has demonstrated. David Green is writing in on this topic and says, I am happy to say that I no longer am ashamed to be blind, and I don't think I can say that I am proud to be blind. I have never met you in person, but here are my observations that give you freedom to be a person who is proud to be blind. And look at this, it is presented in a lovely bulleted list. You have a sharp, keen mind. You are an extrovert. You are well read and well educated. You seem to be humble. You have an interest in people. I would think you are rarely in a place where you are lost for words. You being you makes you user-friendly to the blind and sighted community. You are widely recognized as a public voice with recognized achievements. For example, let's take a situation at an airport. You are getting off the plane and a wheelchair is offered to you or even insisted. Your gift set puts you in the place of not being lost for words, quick and able to advocate and educate on the spot. You have a lot to be proud of and it is recognizable. Now, continues David, let's take another person who is as equally gifted as you but in a totally different area. This person is an introvert. They bury their head in writing code for accessible technology. They don't have the gift of the gab and everything has to be thought through before making a decision. They may not be able to advocate for themselves on the spot, and as a result, feel that they are not so proud to be blind. They are not ashamed, they just feel that blindness can be a nuisance. As always, your podcast is the marmalade on my toast every Sunday morning, here in Ottawa, Canada. Delicious. Thank you very much for your email, David. I'm not sure that I would agree with all of those very flattering portrayals, but even if we assumed that they were true in a general sense about people, can a person who is introverted and quieter and perhaps struggles to find the right word sometimes, isn't as assertive, be proud to be blind? I think they can. The skills that you were talking about, particularly self-advocacy, are very important. And I wish that we could encourage more people to get involved in self-advocacy training. It's the whole thing about give somebody a fish versus teaching them to fish. If you advocate for somebody else, then you may well help to address their immediate problem. But if you equip them with self-advocacy skills, you're setting them up to be able to handle a wide range of scenarios as they arise in a constructive way. But that, I think, is separate from the subject of blind pride. You can be quietly proud. I mean, a dad, for example, who is the strong, silent type, not one for massive displays of emotion, for example, can still be very proud of one of their children's achievements in academia or on the sports field. I think that pride is separate from your expression of the pride. I guess that's what I'm saying. You may be quietly proud of what being blind means to you.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Hello, Jonathan. My name is Michelle Ritholtz-Bernstein, and I was listening to your latest podcast. I think it's number 126. I just wanted to comment about something that you mentioned in the podcast, which may apply to some other of your listeners besides myself. You mentioned when you were talking about in the wish list for what you'd like to see with Apple that you find it difficult to understand why some blind and low vision users prefer the Victor Reader Stream over the iPhone. And I am one of those people who prefers the Victor Reader Stream over the iPhone. And I am low vision and became visually impaired as an adult. I did not grow up in the blind community at all. But when I became visually impaired, I learned how to use the Victor Reader Stream, and it is my preferred way to listen to audiobooks and listen to podcasts and even listen to NFB Newsline as well. And the reason is very simple. It's tactile. And a part of my vision loss involves having extreme light sensitivity. And the iPhone, with its blue light, even if you dial down the volume and, change it to grayscale and things like that, it's very disorienting to my eyes. It's very difficult for me to use the phone. Even if I turn off the screen curtain, there's just something about the iPhone that it's very irritating to my eyes. So I use it as a phone and, a couple of other things. But in terms of listening to audiobooks and podcasts, which I do for several hours each day, I find it much more comfortable for me to use the Victor Reader Stream. It took me a little while. I learned how to use it, and now my fingers just do everything automatically. I have it set up with Wi-Fi, so the podcasts are downloaded automatically. I can search. I live in the U.S., so I can search Bard easily. I use it to listen to Bookshare books. I use it for NFB Newsline. And while I do understand that it is expensive, I personally found the iPhone actually a little more expensive when I purchased my iPhone. But I do think that for some people who have extreme light sensitivity, as I do, having the tactileness of the Victor Reader Stream is very helpful. And I've tried to share this with other people that I've met who are low vision, who have also had difficulty using the iPhone for various reasons, that this is a good option for them, assuming that they're willing to learn how to use the Victor Reader Stream and, of course, that they can afford it. So thank you for your podcast. As someone who's new to the blind community, I find it very helpful and informative.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for taking the time to share your perspective. It's great that we have this choice of technology, and it helps me and maybe others to understand why some people make the different choices that they do. So that was a very informative message, and I appreciate it. Here is someone I can't identify because only their email address is in the From field, so we don't have a name. But they are a happy L-Braille user. Hope everything is going well at Mosen Towers, says this unknown person. I wanted to give you my impressions about the L-Braille since I last asked you about it during one of your shows. So here we go. Summary. The L-Braille is a docking station for a Focus 40 Blue Braille display. The user runs JAWS either with a license or with the annual home license, just like on their laptop or desktop computer. The focus slides in from the left and clicks into place. The overall unit is well put together and doesn't weigh much. Learning the unit, as well as Braille in with JAWS, took about a week. I managed using a wired keyboard until I got familiar with the layout and functions. Many people have told me that learning to use the Braille keyboard would be hard, and I'd want to use a regular keyboard. I found this to be incorrect for me, as I prefer typing in Braille as my primary medium and wanted to force myself to use the Perkins keyboard only. The fan at the top middle of the unit is quiet and only seems to spin up during tasks such as multiple tabs, multiple Word documents, and Outlook running at the same time, running all programs together. This doesn't slow the performance of the unit down at all, though. I found the performance to be reliable and fast, without any issues of slowing down, even with a few programs running at a time. Since the L-Braille is a Windows environment, running any Windows program is easy and works just as expected. Nothing more I can say about that. I thought that I'd not be used to the spacebar being split between dot 1 and dot 4, but I've grown to like it. I also have a Q-Braille and find that spacebar to be cramped up. Exactly, I've said this since I first laid hands on the Q-Braille. Since the L-Braille is, in all sense of the word, a portable computer, I feel the need to no longer carry my laptop and grab for my L-Braille instead. People have said that the SAD would be a laptop replacement. I think we might be reading iPad here, but it says SAD. That's an interesting Braille error. Anyway, my L-Braille is my laptop replacement. Once configured correctly, the user of the L-Braille will be very happy, in my opinion, if given the opportunity and forcing oneself to learn the Braille-in method. The L Braille is an excellent choice. I must say that my work bought me this device, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to afford it myself. However, I love my L Braille, and my dreams of having a truly portable computer have come true with the L Braille. We have recently been talking about what collaboration is like in Microsoft Word if you use a Mac, and Ernest has some experience of this. He says, "Hi Jonathan, I have experienced working in a Word document on a Mac in the application, not in the browser, and collaborating in real time, and it works great. We were only 2 people, so I'm unsure how it will work with several people. I liked that VoiceOver announced feedback when a person opened a document, like person name is here." Thank you, Ernest. It's good to know that collaboration is coming along so nicely on the Mac, because it is something that I make extensive use of with JAWS on Windows.
Hey Jonathan, it's John Lipsy from Utah. I have an interesting tech conundrum for you and the Mosen at large crowd. I have an Echo Studio, which I purchased in, October. And this problem has been there since the beginning, but I just have learned to live with it. And I finally was like, no, I want this to work as it's supposed to. So in addition to all of the other Amazon, like A-Lady skills and music and things that I use my studio for, I Bluetooth it to my Apple TV. I have an Apple TV HD with the latest publicly released software version. And I Bluetooth it because, A, the audio quality in the studio is better than the audio quality on my little TV speaker, and also the studio is closer to my bed, so I can watch TV at a lower volume when I'm laying down and not wake up the rest of the house. And it Bluetooths fine. It connects, VoiceOver comes through the speaker, which I want. The audio of whatever I'm watching comes through the speaker, as I expected. However, whenever a show ends, or if I have to hit the back button because I change my mind and want to watch something else, there is a 7 to 10 second time span where I don't have any VoiceOver audio. It doesn't go back through the TV. It's not routed through the Echo Studio. It's literally not there. If I forget and try to swipe through icons, this time lengthens. This has happened on every software version of my Apple TV, which leads me to think it's an issue with the studio itself. I've tried forgetting the Apple TV and repairing it. I've tried erasing the studio and resetting it. I guess you don't really erase it, but resetting it, whatever. I haven't tried resetting my Apple TV just because it's kind of a pain to download all my apps and get all my credentials and everything. I could do it if I need to, but I really don't want to. This was not an issue. I had a first-gen Echo for a long time, and this was not an issue with that device. If I went back, audio from VoiceOver would start coming immediately through the Echo as expected, and I could navigate and watch something else. I have a temporary stopgap in place. I purchased Airfoil Satellite from Rogue Amoeba, which lets me connect my Mac via Bluetooth to the Echo Studio, and then AirPlay audio from my Apple TV to the Mac, which then goes to the studio. So it's weird, it's daisy-chained, and it's fine, but if I can get this to work the way it's supposed to, that would be brilliant. So if you have any insights, I would appreciate them. I have more questions about different topics, but I'm going to save those for my next message. As always, it is wonderful hearing your show. I try to catch it every week, and hope you and your family are doing well.
I guess my first reaction, John, is what a shame the Echo Studio, given that it is a premium speaker in the Amazon line, doesn't offer AirPlay directly. Do you have another Bluetooth speaker you can try this with? I suppose it's difficult when you have a situation like this, and you're trying to make 2 devices from competing manufacturers to talk to one another, to get one of them to own up and take responsibility. But if you can prove definitively that this problem isn't happening on other Bluetooth devices that you have access to, then it would seem to me the ball is very much in Amazon's court, particularly if we can find out from other listeners whether they have had the same thing. If they've got one of these Echo Studios and they have tried to pair it with their Apple TV, and they've got the same issue with VoiceOver, that would be useful intel, as they say. So, if you can help John with this, please be in touch. 1-864-60-MOSEN is my number in the United States, and you can also drop me an email with an audio attachment like John did, or just write something down. Email it in to jonathan@mushroomfm.com. Here's an email with a moral, and the moral is we get new listeners all the time. This email says, and it's from Beatrice, by the way, "Hi, Jonathan, how are you? I've written to you before, but I wanted to thank you again for all the work you do to help the blind community." That's really kind of you. Thank you, Beatrice. I wanted to ask you about, I believe it's called Soup Drinker. the virtual assistant or search engine you spoke about. How is it obtained? I tried looking for it in the App Store but was unable to locate it there. Can I find it via a website? Or is it something that can be purchased? Thanks in advance. Well, I tell you, see, Beatrice, I'll give you the secret, which long-time listeners to my shows already know, but new listeners will not, so I'm glad you asked the question. The thing is, you see, that where I can, I will talk about the Amazon Echo, but it's not always as easy as doing that, because sometimes the virtual assistant built into the Amazon Echo makes its way to other products. They've made it available to third parties like Sonos and Bose, and it's all over the place. So when I need to refer to it by name, because unlike Siri and Google, where you have to put a hey in front of the names, you just summon this one by saying its name, I've changed the name of mine. So whenever I talk about it, I call it the soup drinker. Stop. So that I don't trigger everybody else's devices. Soup drinker. Stop. Device. So there you go. I hope that answers your question, Beatrice. And that wraps up Mosen at Large. We're just out of time. It's amazing how quickly the time goes.
Here's an email with a moral.
No, we're not gonna have time for that. So I'm looking for the outro pretty quickly, actually, and I'm not finding it. That's a bit of a way. Anyway, I will just go without the outro because we don't want to hold Steve Cutway up. So thank you so much for your company on Mosen at Large today, and we look forward to the Mosen explosion across the week, and we'll see you here next week.